And we are going live. Give this thing just a minute so I can do our quick A/B test, make sure we're all working here while we get warmed up. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so it says I should be live now, I think. Just verifying that it's working on my monitor here. Just now it says. I'm confused why it says I'm not live on my phone, even though I am. Oh, geez. Okay, should be ready in just a minute here. Excited today. We got a really fun episode planned. Okay. I hear audio. Let's verify we've got audio on the. I'm going to assume that's working. We're going to say this is okay. Okay, cool. All right, and then I think that's good. Okay. All right. I believe we're good to go. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ross Shabilsky. I am the founder of D20 Studios. We're an indie game development company based in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we are currently developing an awesome turn-based strategy deck builder game called Summoner's Fate that challenges you to win in the most weird and creative ways possible. So, in our game Summoner's Fate, you play as a god who represents the personification of fate to the characters in this world. And they look up at you literally to command them from the sky as you control their destiny, going on adventures, collecting new cards and characters to build a deck representing your creative strategies, whether that be hurling squirrels at your enemies and mutating them into superhuman Hulk squirrels, summoning hordes and legions of skeletons, massive orcs, dragons, or various other um, choices from our hundreds of cards currently available and that we are adding new content to each week. We are currently in our early access, available on our website, summonersfate.com, and we do weekly development streams. We are a community-driven developer, and we highly value the thoughts, opinions, and ideas of our community. And we like to do these weekly reach outs as well as daily interaction on our Discord channels, which you can find on our website, links at the top here. So if you guys are interested in joining the conversation, sharing your thoughts on game design development, giving us some ideas that you'd like to see on future cards or characters, feel free to hop in there. And today's episode of Develop with Ross, this is our 24th episode. Is that right? I'm trying to remember now. I just had it down. Anyway, today's episode is about level progression systems. So we've started kind of pivoting full force into our single player aspects of Summoner's Fate and getting our campaigns and things working within the game. Last week, we introduced the gold mechanic and built shops that would allow you to buy new cards in the game so you could kind of build your deck as you were going along. A very essential system. And today we're taking a much more broad approach at designing the inherent systems that will determine how the player progresses within the experience. So to give some context, what is a level progression system from a game design perspective? It's the underlying system tuning and balance that defines how the player is going to grow in their powers and abilities throughout the game experience, as well as controls the escalation of the difficulty, such that a properly tuned level progression will ensure that you are at all times matched to an appropriate challenge for the current level of skill, experience, and time vested within the game experience. That's the ultimate goal of a level progression system. So it'll control things like what kind of powers you have early on in the game, how you expand and grow in those powers as you continue playing, what types of enemies you're going to encounter at various levels in the game, the types of challenges, how much rewards you're going to get, all these kinds of things like that. And so it's one of the most essential systems, particularly for RPG type games like ours, where you want to have this sense as you're playing that the characters you are taking along on the journey with you are growing in their experience. Much like a good movie or story, there's development to the characters, and in terms of game speak, it's that development is happening primarily in terms of the abilities, skill sets, things you can do within the game. And I mentioned earlier that our game's about winning in the most creative ways possible. So naturally, what we want to do in our progression experience is kind of a threefold objective. The way I would describe it is in the initial experience, we want players to just sort of be discovering the kinds of cool, awesome things they can do. So we've got a series of cards we'd like to introduce that will kind of give you a taste of what we have to offer in the greater experience, get you really excited, having a good time. And then as you start to learn and understand those mechanics, we want to escalate that experience so that you're now specializing. You know, you've kind of had a sampling of what the game offers in terms of its mechanics, and now you want to specialize. Maybe you really liked throwing squirrels, and you want to now specialize your deck building experience in the mindset of building a squirrel hurling deck that exploits squirrels. And then kind of like I said on that third point, the idea is the exploitation phase where now you become a specialist, but you want to really take and face the most extreme challenges that we can offer. So you're fighting very highly tuned AI that is just overpowered against you, but you're going to take and exploit the systems we presented in a super creative, genius way to overcome those challenges and feel like a badass doing so. So that's kind of the high level goals of what we're trying to achieve. And it's a very interesting design problem. How do you go about creating something that can deliver that kind of experience? And it's been probably one of the biggest challenges throughout the development of our single player is trying to understand the ways in which we take a game like ours, which is inherently at its core balanced for 1v1 battles, almost like a chess game, is how I would best describe the battles. If you're playing chess with cards, that would be like the best way to describe what Summoner's Fate is to someone who has never played it. And so, how do you take a game that's inherently like that and stretch it out over the course of an adventure? Because we want to create this sense of adventure and exploration, and that you're going on this journey, but with that core mechanic of chess tactical strategy battle at its core. And so we don't have a lot of traditional things like what you might expect to see in an RPG, leveling up characters, ability trees. Those are all things that are very complex for the type of game we're creating because inherently it's the interworkings of the characters and units within your team that play together that creates the sense of excitement in the battle, not knowing what's going to happen, what the enemy is going to bring, and then leveraging the combined tools and resources you have to outwit them. And so in past discussions, we've talked about how some of the pillars that make Summoner's Fate stand out from a design perspective are these ideas of um, instilling a sense of adventure and instilling this sense of resource management, that within Summoner's Fate, your available resources to accomplish the grander tasks are limited within the world, whereas more traditional RPGs offer solutions for continuous acquirement of those resources. So to give some examples, if you're playing a traditional RPG, you can go and fight monsters, and as you defeat them, you gain experience points, and then you level up, right? But the thing about that is that you can go back and forth between areas and still fight monsters to grind them to continue leveling up. So it's not a finite resource. The monsters, since they respawn and come back, are continuously allowing you to exploit them for experience, gold, and other resources that you need to reach higher levels. And so there's not necessarily a sense of scarcity within those resources since they are ultimately unlimited. And the player can simply use unlimited time. So if you wanted to, one of my favorite South Park episodes with the World of Warcraft was they decide to just kill boars in the forest to reach level 60. You could do that. And it's a very heavy, long grind, but it's one of the pillars that we have in Summoner's Fate that we want to try to eliminate we want to challenge that trope of traditional RPG design of grinding to gain experience and try to create what I would consider a more grandeur chess game. Like if you were to take chess and expand it a level to like a Risk type of board game where you're sort of trying to take over the whole world kind of a thing, but you've got limited resources in which to do so. I guess that would be a way of describing kind of the direction we're trying to go with this. So today we're going to be working on creating the systems, the underlying systems that we're going to use to tune and balance that exact system. So we're going to start with giving some context for how we begin to approach this problem, and then talk about the tools that we're going to be designing to make this happen, and then actually going about implementing and developing those within the game so that when we go to our next client release, we'll be able to introduce these systems, which will ideally take on the role of providing the kind of experience we want. But rather than having to handcraft each of these campaigns as we've been currently doing, we're going to lean on the systems we've generated to provide that experience. Another way I've talked about this in the past has been the idea that our game kind of parallels like a Dungeons and Dragons. That what we've done is created an engine of rules and mechanics, but in order to have the experience and sense of adventure and development of the characters, there needs to be a person who is assigned the role of dungeon master. And in this case, it's either Peter or myself that has created these sort of handcrafted campaign experiences where we've intentionally laid out a series of escalating challenges and additional cards we want to introduce to help overcome those challenges that are very specifically timed to align with those experiences. But moving forward, we want to be able to have this idea of endless adventures where you come in and have a new experience each time. And it's simply not feasible with the size of our studio to continuously handcraft all of these. We need to lean on smarter methods, technology, and really effective procedural designs to help curate and facilitate the creation of these epic experiences with the virtual dungeon master, if you will, curating these things in the backgrounds for the player. Okay, so let's talk about a few different things here. So first off, I'm going to open up the game because I think this might be a good way to explain sort of how we envision progression working in a game like ours. Okay, so this is Summoner's Fate, and right now I'm launching into the current in development build here, and we're going to go ahead and what we're going to do is this is a kind of introduction to how the game looks. As I said before, it's a top-down based game. This is the campsite or main menu hub for the game through which you access the different parts, PvP battles, the campaigns, and so forth. And it actually, this is designed to make you feel like you're immersed in the game world. So this is actually how the battles would play out. You would fight each other with your characters in this top-down view. And then during combat, they actually tilt their heads to look up at you when they're ready for orders. And so in a typical PvP match, you'll face off with your team against another player's team and attempt to defeat their summoner to claim the victory. In the single player adventures, there's much more long form goals. Ultimately defeating higher level boss characters and enemy factions and armies that will be vastly outnumbering your team of adventurers, but through which in the game experience you're going to be acquiring new cards, abilities, and resources to overcome and defeat those AIs. All right, so one of the fundamental mechanics of the game, though, is that we have this notion that everything is designed in cards. Hey, Meltros is here. Hey, all, says Meltros. Welcome to our stream, Meltros. Today we are having an epic, or what I hope to be an epic conversation about one of the most essential game design faculties, the level progression system. The underlying system that defines how the player will go about the journey, gaining new powers and abilities while facing escalating difficulty challenges so that they're continuously matched to appropriate encounters and challenges as they go along in the adventure. And so right now I'm just kind of giving a high-level overview of how we're approaching this problem of providing a sense of progression and escalation within the context of single player. Okay, so what I just did right now is I opened up our card collection here that kind of shows you some of the different characters and things like that. And we'll just take this guy for example. So here's a character. This is a summoner character, and naturally everything in the game corresponds to a card that defines their basic statistics. In a PvP match, these things are all finite, fixed, and don't change. Um, and it's intentional that way because they're like almost like a chess piece. Like this is defining what his abilities are, and they're fixed within that realm so that players can clearly understand the rules of what his abilities are and how he can manipulate rules. Like this character, for example, can give all of his spells knockback. So when he casts fireballs, they push people around the board and create really interesting strategic tactical situations. Okay, so the issue is how do we take this kind of a character and put him into a sense of a um, escalating adventure where it feels like you're actually growing in power and ability, learning new skills, and choosing upon those skills as you go in a way that the experience is engaging. And so the idea we've come up with is the idea that we're going to initially limit the character's abilities, and we're doing such that we want to encourage players to be able to solve and start to understand the various types of skills that make you successful within those combat encounters. So rather than starting with a full team of characters, which is ultimately what you're going to be fighting with, you start the adventure with a single character. So one of the ways in which we encounter growth is start with a single character, and one of your first tasks is to go and explore and recruit team members to join your adventure party. I also mentioned that you have cards and abilities that allow you, the cards that represent your various spells, abilities, equipment, things like that. And so in the single player, we're going to limit the subset of starting cards so that you don't have access to an overwhelming number. I mean, if you look at right now what I've got here, this is kind of maybe helping to illustrate. There are 32 pages of cards. So imagine you're a player that's never seen this before, and you're coming into this, and I were to tell you, all right, now here's 400 cards. I want you to take and figure out how to make an optimal strategy out of 20 of those cards and a team of three. And it's going to be unless you've got a lot of experience with these type of games and you can decipher right away how our mechanics work. That's a pretty overwhelmingly large task to undertake as a new player, and it doesn't really necessarily invite you along the journey with us in this adventure. So rather than surface all of this to you at once, one of the goals of single player is to limit it and start with a small subsection and then gradually expand it. And think of any game. This is how they all do it. You don't start at level 60 with every single power available. It would just be too overwhelming, and you wouldn't necessarily even feel the impact of that power because you would never have known what it was like to not have it. And part of the excitement of video games is this notion that there's growth, like real growth in the player in terms of their powers and abilities. It feels good to get beaten down by like the 1-1 guys and then gain a new power that lets you obliterate them with this new power that you've acquired, and then to grow in those powers and to face ever increasing challenges. That's part of the excitement of what people like when they go into these types of games, and that's one of the things we're trying to do. So when we look at our cards and things like that here, what we've decided is that we need a way to introduce the cards to the player in a way that feels natural within the sense of an adventure and feels natural for the growth of that character. And so we've had lots of discussions on Discord. Peter and I have had lots of back and forth brainstorm discussions about how to do this, and I'm excited today to kind of showcase our high level plan of how we intend to do this, and how we're going to implement this in the game going forward to see if it actually does work as we intended. Okay, so as I'm browsing through these cards, I'm gonna try and find some examples of things we pointed out. One of the things that we recognized, like one of the ideas that was presented was the idea of kind of mapping powers to like an RPG tree. Like if we had natural connections of, oh, you start with a basic fireball and you graduate to a more powerful like exploding fireball. That's kind of a natural feeling of progression, something that would be very reminiscent if you played other types of RPG games before. And we thought about the idea of doing something like that, where maybe each character had some kind of a tree. And then we thought about the complexity of what was involved in that. With over 400 cards right now, and continuously growing as we continue to expand the game and live services. I mean, we're trying to future think this thing. And what happens when we have 2,000 cards or more? The idea of managing a tree within that vast realm becomes almost daunting and unattainable, really. And so we needed to find another more abstract way to manage the cards and figure out how we could present them in a way that felt like there was escalation, but without creating a insurmountable task of trying to map and define how those choices of an expansion are being surfaced to the player. And so we kind of asked ourselves, is there a way to define looking at this from different perspectives? So one of the perspectives we looked at was, a new player that's never encountered this before. What kind of things are going through their mind? The types of enemies you might be encountering early in the adventure, and what you're going to need to face to defeat them with, and the type of power level that we want to assume players start with as the starting point, and then how is a player going to grow within the game. So the challenge with these types of things is that when I initially approached it, I thought we can just isolate this. This will be a really easy thing. We can isolate the problem and just focus on how we're going to expand the spells and then worry about the other things later. And the thing we learned was that all of these things are interrelated. And that's what makes progression systems so hard, is that you really kind of have to have insight into how the systems are going to connect together in order to effectively design any of them. So it's like a chicken egg problem. You can't just simply do one without the bigger picture of the other, and they both are dependent, requiring each other in this weird circle. So how do you actually design this? You do a little bit each time. You make some guesses, make some assumptions, and then you sort of weigh them back and forth like this, going back to the chicken, back to the egg, and that's kind of how we've been doing this. All right. So anyway, the solution we came to in our discussions this week was that we're going to take our set of 400 cards and we're going to um, categorize them into what we're going to be calling card tiers. And we came up with just kind of four abstract groups. And the spirit of those groups are starting cards. That's the first tier. Cards that are, and the goal of the starting set is cards that are immediately useful to the gameplay, that will be useful in any context or situation, that are naturally intuitive and easy to pick up and understand what it is that they're doing, and that also give you a good flair for what that particular type of spell group or character is ultimately going to allow you to achieve in terms of the combos and synergies later on in the game. In other words, it's about discovery. All right, you're going to introduce new skills to the player, but you want to have a great starting set that, and I'm not talking just like, oh, fireball level one that's weak and doesn't provide much insight. Then you're going to get the bigger. Like, we're not going to go to that level of extreme. Everything in Summoner's Fate is designed to feel like there's an epic awesomeness to it. So in our case, when I say starter, it can sometimes feel off-putting, like, oh, they're going to be weak or unpowerful cards. No, that's not the case at all. It's simply what we consider, I guess, the signature, or quintessential abilities of the characters that would be using those cards. So let's take an example. I'm going to use my sort tool here, which you can't see the button for, but I'm going to open it up. And we're going to look at the chaos spells, because this is probably one of the easiest ones to describe. And we're going to look at some cards here and then talk about how we categorize these into tiers. And then we're going to do a little bit of this ourselves, as I'll be mapping some of the cards to the tiers we've determined, and you are welcome to facilitate that with me, discuss and debate where you think these card tiers would go, because Peter and I sort of just took an initial pass at this and wrote down categories, but I'll give you some examples of our thought process. So starting signature abilities of a character. We're looking at cards that would be immediately useful and give you an idea of the power and what you can do with those classes. So here's an example of one that I would consider a quintessential starting spell. So Dragon's Breath. All right. Chaos spells in our game are all about unleashing the raw potential energy of the universe, which is often chaotic in nature. It's spontaneous, it's unpredictable, it's unstable. And so the cards typically have a lot of direct damage effects, that where it unleashes that raw power to damage enemies. That's one of the quintessential signature traits of the Chaos spell group and of the characters that use the Chaos spells. And so Dragon's Breath is awesome. It costs 1 mana, so you can cast it right away. It does a lot of damage to characters in this cone of fire, and it gives a great signature example of the card, and it's immediately understood how to use it. Okay, so player picks up the first time, it deals damage. And so that's a great example of a starting card. Another one we picked as a starting card, the Cleansing Fire. Now this one's a little bit more complex, but what we like about it is that for a Chaos character playing it, it allows you this ability to heal, and healing is one of the inherent abilities that you want to have early on, and this particular card good really represents that well. So let's talk about some examples of things that are a little more advanced. All right, so we've got this Melt card. So this card specifically is designed to facilitate removal of a debuff, the frozen debuff, or deal damage. So we looked at this card, and I'm trying to remember how we categorize this. I think we categorize this as a tier 2 or tier 3. And to give an idea, like so the tiers were tier 1 would represented starting cards, cards that would be great to begin the game with in any shape or form, and that represented signature traits of that spell group. Tier 2 medium cards are giving you a bit more expansion into the spell group and starting to let you experience some of the more advanced abilities, and but not getting and also feel like you're getting a sense of escalation in terms of raw brute strength over the first tier cards with different characters and abilities. And then tier 3, or we call those like the medium plus cards, are when you start encountering enemies that are going to use some of the more advanced mechanics against you, such as debuffs. So if you think about the types of enemies you encounter in Summoner's Fate, early on it's going to be just simple mobs of characters with basic attacks, and they're going to be kind of challenging to understand how to move and use your placement to move and attack and engage them. And then they're going to graduate into more complex mobs that may have champions or that may have the ability to place debuffs like poison and ice and things like that. And then the next escalation of enemies starts to introduce the enemy summoners, in which case they're now casting cards against you and have powers that match the player's own. And now you have to think even more deeper about how to defeat them. You'll also be seeing enemies that are bigger, larger in size, and that can't be just defeated with regular tactics. So you're going to have to use more advanced combinations to win against them. And so that's our advanced tier. So Melt would be an example of a card that falls into either the medium or medium plus because it's not particularly useful until you're encountering enemies that are actually, placing debuffs on you. And it's most useful when you see enemies that are encountering that type of thing a lot. So this is an example of a card that we don't necessarily want to have surface as a ability for the player until they've reached that point in the progression. And so what we do is we categorize this as like a tier 3. Let's give some more examples of cards. Um, okay, so here's another one. This one I think we have categorized as a tier 2. Could also be arguably a medium plus. But Dragon Hatcher. So this is a card that is a little bit more advanced than a starting card because its value is not immediately there in its initial cast. So you have to place an egg and then essentially destroy the egg to get the dragon under your control. So this requires, it's got kind of two uses. One is working the egg as an obstacle to barricade enemies coming in, and then or potentially placing it within proximity of your own units to use their attacks to hatch a dragon. Well, again, if you're starting the experience with a single character, you're limited in the number of characters you have available to help hatch the egg. So it doesn't make sense to surface this immediately, but rather later in the experience when you've got the other resources necessary to synergize with it. Okay, we'll look at some other ones that are. Let's see if we can find some good examples of some of these other ones. Okay, here's a great one. This is definitely an advanced card. So Gate of Fate. This is one of the most interesting, one of my favorite cards in the game because it just totally represents the nature of chaos and raw potential becoming something incredibly powerful and awesome. So this card opens a portal, and then at the start of your turn, it summons the next unit in your deck. This card is made for synergy. It's meant to be used with very high cast costs, very large, powerful creatures, with the idea being you create this sense of doomsday on the opponent by placing this portal for very low cost, and then allowing that to summon something that is worth multitudes more than the 2 mana, like a giant red dragon coming out of the portal would be awesome, and summoning it. But is this an appropriate card for the beginning levels? Definitely not, because when you're starting the game and have only a few cards to choose from, and probably not cards that represent big monsters, it doesn't make sense to have a Gate of Fate service as a choice. So naturally, we decide to categorize a spell like this as a tier 4 advanced, which means it won't become available as a choice to the player until much later in their experience when they've had opportunities to develop and add these larger creatures to their deck. And then speaking of larger creatures, let's see here. So if we got somebody like where's that big old dragon? Here we go, this guy. Big old red dragon. Okay, so here's an example of another creature. So this guy obviously would be useful early on, but it also kind of represents I guess like an aspirational thing. Like it's a really powerful, awesome, epic thing. And so we don't want to necessarily give this up front. We want to have players work a little bit, gain a little bit of experience so that when you do get the red dragon, it comes at an opportune time when you're starting to face enemies that also have much larger power and life statistics as you see here. So that it's sort of like like a at the right time, like when I needed it, like ex machina, this thing, it comes available as a choice to defeat whatever the next horde is. That's kind of the idea. So here's another example of like a tier 4 advanced card. And then I'll give you another example. So Fireball, this one is an incredibly powerful card. It deals 4 damage in a 3/3 area. But we actually decided to make Fireballs as a starting tier card, so tier 1. So this would be something immediately available as a starting power, which enables you to get a sense of the raw, awesome power and how fun it is to play cards in Summoner's Fate, because this card not only destroys enemies, but it rips up the terrain, blows up the grass, melts trees, all kinds of cool stuff. And so we want to have a number of cards in the beginning that immediately give you a sense of how awesome and fun it is to play Summoner's Fate, because we want you to continue the experience and then start to see how creative you can get by combining the different cards. Okay, so then here's an example of an evolution of that. Exploding Fireball is similar to Fireball, but it deals more damage and it also causes knockback, which is a more advanced mechanic. So we have this as I believe, medium or medium plus card that you would see surface as a choice after you've already had a chance to experience what the Fireball's like. So it feels like you've evolved a little bit. But there's not a hard code set tree where you have to have one or the other. It's simply we're putting into these buckets where the algorithm we're going to use to surface card choices to the player is going to be smart about when it puts certain cards out there for you as choices. Okay, so there's an example of kind of how we've decided to categorize. And so we'll be doing some of this categorization today because we've got a lot of spells to go through, and that's one of the aspects of what we'll be doing in the actual work portion of this. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to exit out of this. Let's just go ahead. I don't want to quit it. I'm not sure if that'll actually. Let's do it this way. Okay, boom. Okay, so that's that. All right, now, so we've got the cards and that idea put into place. Now, how are players actually making the progression? So I'm going to go into the maps and kind of talk a little bit about how that would work. All right, so shop test. Let's do this choose a card test. Okay, so we're gonna start a scenario. This is a really basic example. All right, so this is a silly example. In fact, maybe I'm gonna jump to another example of a level here. This is not necessarily a good one because it's not really showing the different parts I want to have. Okay, this is a good example. Okay, so this is going to take a little longer to look because it's actually loading a full campaign. These levels are all chained together right now. And just take a second. One of my to-do tasks is to streamline how it's loading the campaign. Right now it's scanning every single level for assets, and that will be one of the things we're fixing later on. Okay, so here's an example of kind of how we talked about that progression. So I took a character that in the game, normally in PvP, she has 20 health. And one of the things I decided to do for the single player was to limit her health down to 5 so that you would have a chance to explore her innate abilities, but with limited health so that there's a greater sense of danger amongst the enemies you're facing. So I'm not fighting another enemy summoner right now. I'm fighting just 3 1/1 skeletons. They don't have any powers. They just are 1/1s. So there's not really a chance they're going to kill me here, but there is a chance they could deal some damage and cause me to lose some life, which will affect my adventure going forward because part of the early game's goal is just to survive. To survive and make the best of the draft you're given. So you're basically going to be surfaced random cards, and your goal is to take and pick the best of those cards you think that are going to help you survive and maybe give you a sense of discovering the kinds of decks that you may want to build going forward. It's all about the discovery of what the game has to offer and keeping yourself alive. Not so much yet about planning a super synergistic combo deck, but rather give me a taste of what the mechanics are and give me a chance to survive the threats of this world. Okay, so in this case, I can fireball one of them, and now I've got a card, and I can choose to use this. Now, when I do, it'll limit my cards available for the next encounter. All right, so go ahead, melt these skeletons, and boom. Okay, so here what we got here, this is an example of the choose a card. So now I've got a choice of different cards I can pick. And what will happen is that these will get added to my deck collection. And so as time goes on, I'm acquiring new cards and abilities, building a bigger stack of cards that represent my powers. And so I've got more powers to use and so forth. And that's kind of how the mechanics will work. All right, right now they're going to my hand. We're planning on correcting that and changing it back to going into the deck. All right, and then I can pick up some gold. And I can later use this to go into the shops and buy additional cards, which give me new cards and abilities. All right. So some things to note, though, again, I said, life is limited, so I don't have my full 20 health. So there's the opportunity to progress in power by gaining additional health. There's the opportunity to progress in power by gaining additional cards. And then we're going to look at other more advanced ways that we'll go about later in the game. All right. So that's that portion of it. Now I'm going to open up something a little bit more advanced. So this is kind of where we started trying to map an overall strategy for how this system will play into the game going forward. And this is where we're going to be utilizing our Google Sheets here to define and tune what we believe an effective progression would be for the player. Okay, so this is cool. I remember when I worked at EA, our designers worked almost exclusively in Excel. So the fact that I've now got something in Excel helps me feel like I'm heading in the right direction as a designer. Like, okay, I'm in Excel now. Now I'm a legit designer because I've got things in a spreadsheet and we're starting to do the tuning process. I mean, this is all design is at the hardcore level. You see most AAA or industry designers are working in Excel to do all the math and figure out how these things are going to work. And so that's kind of what we've done here is created a map of these different things. And so I'll kind of talk a little bit about the different things, but one straight simple forward way to do this is to take and plot levels down. All right. And I suppose I should probably define what level is. And I know I'm jumping around a lot and trying to describe different things, but I think I mentioned earlier, part of the difficulty of defining and understanding how we design these systems is that they all sort of tie into knowing about other things. So we kind of do have to jump around a little bit in the discussion to determine how we came up with these definitions, where this spreadsheet came from, but also design the spreadsheet at the same time to make it all make sense. That's the magic and the mystery of game design. Okay, so where did this come from? One of the essential questions that we have to answer as the designers of Summer's Fate and creating this escalating sense of difficulty within the adventures to create the virtual dungeon masters, if you will, is to create a way to numerically, and numeric is important because there's no other way a program is going to understand how to quantify challenge, difficulty, and power than with a number. So everything is all about representing things as a number. All right, we need a numerical way to measure what. Number one, how do you quantify the player's power, their ability, their skills and power within the game, their potential, not their true skill, like their player skill, but their characters and their inherent, like what capabilities, what faculties they have to be able to take on certain challenges, right? So give an example. If I had this, my 5/5 2/5 summoner here, and I were to plop, this on the board, I'm not going to survive that encounter. Okay, this is an example of an encounter that will end in my death 100% of the time. Doesn't matter how skilled I am, this will be a death sentence. I will be clobbered by these demon lords and their giant hammers because I simply do not have enough physical resources available to outstand the bombardment of these characters. And you can see they have much more health than I do, and there's four of them. And even with all my spells here, I'm going to run out of cards before I ever defeat them. Right. So already you can kind of sense that there is some measurement here, right? There's some way of measuring the power level here. I clearly have not enough stats to defeat these monsters, so this would be an inappropriate challenge for the current level of which I'm at. Now, later in the game, if I've acquired, maybe I have 50 health, for example, and I've got more cards, then this would probably be an easy challenge, right? Because, or if I have more characters, maybe if I've got, this team here helping me out, now it feels like a more fair fight, right? So that's kind of the first task is how do I quantify what that value is in terms of a number, right? Because the issue with this here is like even in my first example where I've got a 2.5 and a 4.18, there's some number we can define there, but it's not a simple, easy judgment number. And I need to take and convert this very complex cerebral problem into a simple number. And likewise, I need a way to figure out how to quantify the value of this number. All right, so I've got four demon lords here. How do I quantify that into a numerical measure of challenge or difficulty? Once I can do those two things, I now have a magical means through which I can curate an experience because now it just comes down to match up the player's potential and their skill level with the enemy challenge level. And if those numbers are in approximate balance, then we can ensure that we've curated and matched the player to an appropriate challenge for the level within the progression spectrum that they are at. So that's another way of kind of framing the task at hand and what we're trying to get to with these spreadsheets, definitions, and designs. Okay, so the question became for us, how do we quantify that? Because certainly player skill does play into that. Now, I'm going to table player skill factor for a moment because I believe that difficulty skill, like some players are going to be smarter and not necessarily smarter, but more suited based on past game experience to understand the intricacies of how to overcome what seemingly are impossible challenges to a player that's never encountered this. So there's player skill to take into account too. But the great thing about that is once we've established sort of a baseline comparison, we can then, in the same way you can handicap sports like golf or bowling by giving a newer player an advantage in terms of points or starting skills so they can compete naturally with more seasoned players. The same thing works true of games. If we have a base understanding of the core rules and what like an even match looks like for two different sets, we can compensate giving newer players an easier challenge appropriate to their skill level and more seasoned players a more challenging experience that's better suited for their more advanced existing skills within the genre of the game we're building. All right, so it kind of boils down to the same problem though, is how do you get that initial comparison? That's really what the core is. Once we have that initial comparison, we can then tune it both ways, making an appropriate experience for players of all skill levels, right? Okay, so we still have to quantify what that skill level is. And this is one of those things where you just have to sort of make a call. You have to just sort of pick something. And that's what makes design hard. You have to just make decisions and then kind of, like I guess with the decision, it's also an assumption. So you're making a decision based on an assumption, and then you're going to go ahead and move forward and test that assumption works, and then calibrate as need be. So that's kind of that chicken egg problem I said before. Which came first, chicken or the egg? You know what? Today it's the egg. We're going to assume it was the egg, and we're going to go forth, with that assumption. Then we'll go back and reassert that later once we've had a chance to see how it feels from a playing perspective. And so that's what we're doing here. So I'll post my notes here, and we'll talk about how I came to this. I'm trying to remember which note it was. If it was this guy, or okay, yeah. So here's some notes like brainstorm wise. I went through my discussion of what defines player level. So I'm gonna define player level as the numeric measure of how well suited the player is to take on the challenges of our single player campaign, right? So in our first case example, when I presented Lee the Summoner, we're going to say she's level 1. And so what does that mean? Level 1 means that the character has low starting health, so instead of having the normal 20, she's got 5. Instead of having a whole pile of cards, she starts with 3, right? So that's level 1. That's the base point of understanding measurement. And clearly, this encounter here is something much higher than level 1. I don't know what level this is yet, but it's not level 1. We have to figure out relatively how to quantify what this is as we go in the experience. But let's say that that's level 1. All right. So now we have to come up with a definition for how does the player actually increase in levels? What is the measure that's increasing their power, right? And when do they increase in power? And what does that exactly entail? And what does it mean? Okay. So this is kind of now we're putting together a framework for what the level progression actually is. So player level, that for us is the measure of which the numeric measure of a player's potential to defeat challenges. Not their ability, because again, we can't measure skill level yet. It's their potential. It's the assuming that they play in the, I guess medium difficulty is what we'll probably call this. That's the measure of how their potential to defeat challenges in the game. Okay, and so what defines it, or another, what increases it? So I explored several different options here. The one I've landed on is that we're going to define level as the number of unique encounter battles won. So I'll talk about that in a second, but let's first go through some other ones. So we could say that when the player defeats monsters, they could earn XP. Okay, and then we could have different XP values for different enemies. So if you defeat easy enemies, you get low XP. If you defeat harder enemies, you get more XP. More XP could lead to more levels, and so forth. Now, when that's kind of how a traditional RPG would work too, is that you would have monsters of various difficulties. So in the beginning, you'll have level 1 monsters, and when you defeat them, you'll get level 1 appropriate XP rewards. So maybe you get 50 XP. But then you defeat level 2 monsters, maybe they give you 100 XP, and you sort of continue to progress and escalate in terms of higher numbers as you go on. And I paused at that and thought, we could do that, and that would be a very reasonable, well-known design trope of RPGs to follow that sort of XP thing, except for the fact, as I said earlier, that we don't want players to grind to level up. One of the things that I want to make Summoner's Fate stand out from other RPGs is that we don't want to follow the same tropes and design patterns they've used, because if we do that, then players are really just experiencing another flavor of the same thing they've already played. And from an indie perspective, that's really bad because it doesn't give you any kind of unique angle through which to approach and attract players of these types of games, right? People that make RPGs in this type of way that have had years more experience and much larger teams and much more resources to build them than I do are going to do a better job than I can do. I can't as a one-man designer hope to win in that battle arena, right? But what I can do is approach it from an entirely different angle and ask, what is the greater market of AAA video games not doing, where there could be an opportunity to do something interesting that would excite players because it's something new that they haven't experienced before. And that's where I sort of look for these opportunities. And for me, as a player, one of the pillars of which Summoner's Fate is created on is this notion that I enjoyed a lot playing tabletop RPGs growing up, like Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, and so forth. And I also like playing these long-form RPGs on my computer and on my consoles. But it's a lot harder to do that for me now because I've grown up, got a full-time job, I've got a family, I've got kids, and as time becomes limited, the investment of immersion and time is a resource I don't have to spend. It's not that I can't afford to buy games, it's that I just simply don't have time to invest in those types of experiences. And grinding is one of the key things about traditional games that leads to a lot of time being used. In other words, what I want to hope to achieve with Summoner's Fate is I want to cut to the chase. Why do players grind in RPGs? Because they want to get to something, right? It's an extrinsically motivated system where they put a carrot in front of your face and say, you want to get this carrot because when you get that carrot, you're going to feel good about yourself. You're going to be more powerful. You're going to be more awesome. And it's sort of the primary motivating factor um, for playing the game. And but there's another aspect of it, which is there's a natural enjoyment to playing the game itself. Like there's, sometimes going through the motions of, chopping up guys, feeling like you're well skilled, pushing yourself and really immersing in the things that you find enjoyable with the mechanics themselves. Like if you take that carrot out of there, what's left and what's enjoyable about that? That's what's intrinsically motivating about the game. And that's the part that for me really feels like the biggest, what really makes people feel joy in games is the faculties of game design that intrinsically motivate you, that are fun just because the activity itself is fun and because it leads to some kind of personal growth of skill or discovery or problem solving. Why do people do crossword puzzles? Because it gives them a sense of overcoming a challenge and exercising their brain. You feel good about it. There's not a reward you get for solving the crossword puzzle at the end. You just like the activity. And I feel like that's how games should be. And and I feel that's the opportunity for me as an indie to explore when everybody else is pushing, you know, these loot boxes and rewards as like keep playing our game so you can get this thing in the loot box. That's a sign that they've lost the way. The game's not fun because it's fun to play it. It's fun because I want to get something. And a lot of these games have even moved in the direction where you're not even playing the game. They have these I guess they're called idle RPGs now, where you don't even play the game. It just plays itself for you because they realize that players don't care about playing. They just want the rewards. And so when we went to focus on Summoner's Fate, this is a key pillar for us. We want to make a game that's fun to play, not a game that's about putting aside to get rewards. So one of the ways in which I've raised concern about this is that we don't want players to grind to level up. So if there's an opportunity where you can go back and fight the same monsters over and over again with the hope that you're going to get more powerful, we have failed within the design pillar of Summoner's Fate. That is something we don't want. Okay, so if you're not grinding to level up, what is it instead? So for us, it's resource management. That's the idea. And we consider levels or power within the game to be a resource that has to be carefully planned and managed. It's part of the crossword puzzle that you're ultimately playing within the single player campaign. So if you think about our battle system right here when we fought those skeletons as like a chess match, that's the tactical battle. That's sort of like the one-off puzzle. Our single player is designed to be a puzzle of puzzles, with the idea being that within this greater puzzle of puzzles, there are limited resources. They are scarce and they are finite. They are not endlessly grindable like a traditional RPG. And you as a player have to make conscientious choices about when to go after those resources to give you the means to defeat the harder puzzles. And that itself is a puzzle, right? Because I have to survive through the puzzles of puzzles to get to these resources so that I have the means and the power level through which to defeat this harder puzzle. And how you go about doing that is the magic of what makes our single player stand out from the current PvP multiplayer. It's creating a metagame on top of the existing puzzle structure while harmoniously tying in all the existing attributes of our currently fun and awesome tactical based gameplay. Right? So this is kind of like a different way of which we're standing out as designers in this unique territory that we're going for in Summoner's Fate. All right, so if levels are a resource, they're not something that can be just grinded for. They're going to be limited in how you acquire them, and it's going to be difficult to acquire levels and so forth. So I wrote down some other notes about this, and I kind of jump around, but one of the ways we're going to handle that is that ultimately we want to have a world where you can backtrack. So you have different choices of where to go after. You'll be able to visualize where the resources are and make plans about your strategy of which to go after first and second and so forth to defeat these enemy types, the bosses within the world. So you'll be able to backtrack. But one of the things we note here is that when you backtrack through levels, there will be battles that you have to face through, but they will not be battles that reward levels. They're going to cost you resources instead. And what resources are going to cost you is that you're going to have to either spend your cards and use your spells to survive, or you're going to pay in blood. You're going to take damage from those enemies trying to get to the other resources, and that's going to in turn cost you resources to get other resources. So that's where the strategy comes into play. Okay. And let's see, higher tiers where variance of enemies vastly depends on deck. Player hedges bets by exploiting resources or playing better strategically. So yeah, this is sort of another, not a concern, but rather a definition of how we um, handle things. Oh, then we also have gold in here too. So we have the idea that gold is a limited resource that will plot specific places in the overworld where gold is available, which is a resource allowing you to acquire better cards or cards that better complement your strategy, I should say, not better, but more synergistic for your particular strategy. And that will be a type of resource you're going to have to exploit to defeat enemies that will be exploiting you by having overwhelming force and power. So an example would be like these characters, I kind of plopped in the map, have an overwhelming sense of power in the sense they just simply have more damage and more life than I have. But if I have a deck that enables me to do things like freeze them all so they lose their turn, or blockade them from moving forward to attack me, and I can shoot them from a distance and whittle them down. I can create strategies where even though my stats are lower, I can leverage and exploit the resources in such a way that I can overcome an overwhelming force by funneling them into a carefully planned trap. That's the kind of experience we want players to be able to have within the single player. Okay, so and that's how we came to this idea. So we ultimately had to pick something to determine what player level was. I felt that XP was too granular and too much of a trope with existing things, so we're defining levels based on a unique combat one. So it's a one-to-one thing, and it doesn't matter that you gain a level each time because the experience will appropriately tune itself. So as you get higher in level, the experience will continue to challenge you further, so that you're always at this nice balance of difficulty for where you are in the experience, right? All right, so now that we've kind of defined that factor, this spreadsheet will start to make a little bit more sense. So level here represents the player level. Game level, don't worry about that. I haven't actually plotted this because what I'm starting to recognize is that if player level represents the number of battles won, game level would represent the number of areas explored. And not every area is going to be a battle. It's going to be rest points, shops, choices about which characters to recruit, and so forth. And so the number of levels doesn't correspond to the number of actual battle or player level here. But know that within the higher tier campaign, there will be specific points through which you are able to battle and acquire levels, and that those battles will in fact be a resource that you're going to want to go after to increase your power. Okay. And so we look at some different things here, and one of the things I'm starting to map here is, okay, for each level, I can define the different attributes that represent the player's power level, right? So this is kind of the definition of what is going to become the progression system. So I've got my player level here, and I've got some different things I have. This here is sort of like the number of cards I would expect the player to have in their deck based off of the current power level they're at. Right? So this gives me some insight on how to tune encounter difficulty. And I've got some notes here. Encounter difficulty, we've got, early on, the first five levels, you're facing cannon fodder, which is basically just simple monsters without any kind of complex abilities, and you're simply trying to survive against them and navigate on the board appropriately. Then we start adding in cannon fodder with champions. The champions modify the cannon fodder, giving them additional abilities or more power than they would have on their own. And we start adding summoners, which can cast cards and have abilities on you. And then eventually we have bosses. And then we have these things called resource management mobs, which are just highly synergistic mobs of characters that aren't designed to necessarily kill you, but they're designed to cost you resources so that when you go into boss battles, you're at a disadvantage. So you have to figure out how to navigate and effectively defeat resource management mobs to defeat them. All right, what are some other things we have here? We've got life, like how much life should the player have at different levels. They have 5 starting. They gain another 3 points at level 6, it looks like. And then at level 10, they've got 11, 14, 20, and then this could keep going, right? So we can continue to progress and increase health. More health means more survivability. You can take on larger challenges. Likewise, the enemies can increase in health and so forth. All right, we got number of companions we expect players to have, just solo by themselves, then they get a second companion, our first companion, second companion. And then we got these card tiers, which would determine the types of cards you could see. I've got another table where I've got to probably clean this up a little bit better. I've had different ways I've looked at the card tier problem, but let's say, for example, we talk about this from a really simple thing. We've got number of card choices. So when you level up, you'll get to choose a new ability, which will add to your resources and your power to defeat and take on harder challenges. Initially, you have just a choice of 3 cards. As you increase in level, you get a choice of more cards, which allows you to further specialize. So on the left here, I'm going to move this over. You've got sort of the high-level goals I've got for each of the various chapters within the experience. I divide into chapters kind of just blocking various levels into high-level design goals. So I mentioned the first goal is all about discovery. It's just survival. I should probably put survival as well. That's another goal of this chapter. Survival, discovery, onboarding, I guess you could say is part of this. And your goal is to kind of build like your base deck. An initial set of cards allows you to defeat your first boss. Once you get past that first boss and you graduate into specialization, now you're getting a choice of more cards. You can have access to shops. One of the things we see happening here is that we're going to be increasing the number of cards available in shops. So initially, you might have 12 cards in the shop, then 24, then 36, and 48. And so what that's doing is it's helping to hedge the random. So whereas before you were sort of just getting random cards, now you'll have more choices available, and you'll be able to specialize and create synergies where the power of your deck is greater than the sum of its parts, right? You are able to combine things in such a way that they're more powerful than they would be on their own. And then at the more advanced tiers, now you're going to be focused on like pure exploitation. So we're going to have different types of abilities that will grant you different types of equipment you can buy, different types of abilities that enhance your character's power levels, and that can synergize with the deck strategies. So these will be sort of like meta powers you can attach via equipment or permanently grafted abilities that allow you to make a deck that's not just specialized, but that exploits, that breaks the game. We want you to break the game because what we're going to be doing is throwing monsters at you that are also cheating. They're going to be way overpowered in terms of health, way outnumbering you. And so to defeat them, you're going to have to exploit your strategy and break our game design in ways that feel broken, but that feel awesome. That's the ultimate goal of this third chapter of the game. And this will just sort of continue in escalation. You could go on indefinitely plotting out how this progression unfolds further in the game. But take note of the resources or the tools of which you're using to do this. So I chose this in a spreadsheet because this is sort of the natural go-to resource for designers because of what it does here, right? It allows me to create a visual map of the entire experience in sort of one nice at-a-glance view, something that I can't currently achieve within my sort of one-off design tool where we're focusing on individual units, individual encounters. I can't get a big picture from this tool, but with the spreadsheet, I can. And I can also effectively tune all aspects of the difficulty and such within this spreadsheet and make quick and rapid changes. So as we playtest, we can start to understand what it feels like. Do I feel as a player like I'm being challenged? Is it too hard? Is it too easy? And then we can make quick adjustments by changing these values within this thing here, right? So number of cards at shop, number of shop tiers, and so forth. Okay, so we've defined that. Now the big question is, how do we get this into the game? How do I actually make this happen so we can begin to play test and see this come together and sort of test and understand how we can then grow and evolve and really get this working? Because right now, up to this point, it's all been a great discussion. It's all theoretical, but it's not testable or practical yet because we're just making assumptions, right? That's the first goal of design, is to make assumptions, make decisions, assume it's going to work, and now that we assume it's going to work, we're going to go ahead and build it, right? So now we're going to put this in the game. All right, so what's necessary here? I thought yesterday the big insight that came to me was I've got all this stuff in the spreadsheet. Rather than trying to create a new tool that would define all these attributes I just came up with, wouldn't it be awesome if I could just take this spreadsheet I already made and have the game read it in and do stuff with it, right? I thought that'd be pretty awesome, right? To just take my spreadsheet and put it in there. So I thought, yeah, you know what? Why not? So what I did was I got some open source code and we built a way to import Excel documents and I just added it as another consumable resource that the game can load in. So now this is yet another form of game definition that can actually affect and make real changes in the game. And so that's what we do. We literally export this and we do it like such. Download as uh, Microsoft XLX. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and put it into the game apps folder here. And we put that into level prog XLX. All right. And then I added it to the game's, let's see here. Where'd it go? Summoner's Fate apps. Ah, there it is here. Our game's manifest. So now it's another type of resource. You can see here I've just plopped it in. And by adding it to the manifest, the game will go ahead and load it in. When it loads in the assets, it'll convert it to a byte array, and then the byte array can be converted using another piece of open source that converts that into a usable document. All right, so let's go take a look and see what that comes out to here. All right, so I'm going to open up the the new class we created yesterday and talk you through this. All right, so this is the level progression data class. And what it does is it takes its entire objective is to get the progression data based on the level. And it sounds complex, but it's really simple what I'm trying to do here. What I want to do is, if I want to take and understand at any given level I may be at, what options are available to tune the experience. And the idea being that this could, of course, expand indefinitely with all kinds of other rows and columns and so forth. But let's do something really simple. All right, so let's say right now I want to be able to control how many cards I can choose from, and I want to control how many cards I can see in the shop. That's the first task I decided to work on because it's really simple, easy to understand, and it's a great way to test that this resource is working. All right, so at level 1, I can choose 3 cards. At, what's this here, level 18, I can choose 4 cards, right? So what the level definition, level progression data class needs to do is convert a level into the information I need to make a decision about what I can do with that particular level. All right. So let's go back into our choose a card test. This is my little test where I'm going at this here. And so I defeat an enemy. I get to choose a card. What I did was I went to my choose a card, and whereas before I had hard coded this to say 3, I now say choose card 2, ability user property, right? And the ability user in this case is the player, so the property level prog, which represents our level progression magical data thing that we made, number of card choices, okay? And so what this is going to do is it's going to, I'll show you. Let's go to the player class. Player, okay, and we're going to go to level prog, okay, oops, where are you, level prog, all right, there we go, level prog, so this represents our level progression, all right, and so the first thing that this is going to do is it's going to get my current level, all right, the level of the player is simply stored as an attribute, and we can control when the player levels up based off of any rule we want, but remember we chose to level up the player whenever they win a unique battle encounter. All right, so we'll have a level. And if the level is less than 1, we make it 1. So the 1 is the lowest level you can be. And then what we do is we request a level progression data. Okay, so this goes and gets data for level. Let's go follow this trail. And here we are. Okay, if the sheet is not defined, this is the spreadsheet data, we initialize the spreadsheet. And this is where this method here will go ahead and get our asset loader, which loaded in that spreadsheet file, which I showed you, which came directly from my Google Doc and was exported, is imported into the game. So this gets the byte array for that, which is automatically created based off of our existing asset loader process. And then it creates a new XLS loader, and then it loads it from the byte array and converts it into a workable sheet. Oh, it also can specify which sheet I want. So I can actually export a document. This has actually got multiple sheets, card tier, you got abilities, and all kinds of other weird things I have on here. And what this is doing is allowing us to get a specific sheet out of that. And now that we've got that sheet, I can then create a new level progression data. Or if my level currently matches the one I have, there's no reason to recreate it. I just reuse the one I have. So the player will actually store a level progression data, but it will check to see each time if their level has changed, then request a new one. All right, so what happens when we make a level progression data? Really simple here. All right, level progression data, I pass in my current level, right? And then I'm going to figure out which row I'm at, okay? And I have a really simple method for doing that called get the closest row of column not exceeding value. What does that algorithm do? Well, let's say I've only defined a certain number of tiers. Like this looks pretty complex. Let's go to this table. All right, so let's say I've only defined up to level 18. What happens if you're level 19? Well, there is no level 19 defined, so I have no idea what data I'm supposed to get. But what the closest not exceeding does is it says if I haven't defined what level 19 is, fall back to the closest not exceeding, in which case it would be row 18, right? So I would use the row 18 data and so forth, right? So this is a way basically creating a fail-safe where if I haven't defined what the level data is, I use the previous level's data, the closest previous level's data, as the algorithm would so aptly recognize here with that. Okay, and then what we're going to do is get all the various things we want. So we've got level. These card tiers represents the type of cards I can surface. So we talked earlier about the card tiers, right? So you can see here in the experience, one of the things I've mapped out is said, all right, at levels 1, we're having only tier 1 cards, 2, only tier 1 cards, 3 and 4 and 5, right? And you can see what's happening here. This is what's cool about the visualization of an Excel sheet. In the beginning of the game, you're getting tier 1 cards, which are immediately useful, easy to understand, not very complicated rules. And then what happens at level 6? We're graduating to slightly more complex cards, medium tier cards. And then we're giving players more advanced cards at tier 3, starting at level 12. And finally, some of those ultimate super cards at level 16 and 17. And so you can kind of see here how this creates a natural escalation, and it's all highly tunable. So if I decide players are needing to have more powerful cards or less powerful cards, I can easily go in there and change these numbers around. And the other thing that we're gathering here is the number of card choices. So at a particular level, how many card choices do I get when I get to choose my card? And how many cards does the shop have available for me to choose from? And again, as you increase in level, you get more choices. It's very natural. You don't want players overwhelmed with choice in the beginning. You want them to make the best of their survival. So it's kind of two use cases. The new player who's onboarding is going to be overwhelmed by too many choices. So you limit the menu, right? A more advanced player is going to know what they want. They're going to be searching for it. But a more advanced player playing through the early levels is also going to have an interesting challenge because whereas the new player is more about getting access to the getting an understanding of what card choices are available, the more advanced player in early levels is going to be trying to make the most optimal choice from the limited menu they have and trying to use that as a basis for a later deck they may be trying to build. So it's actually good for both players. It's kind of like a limited draft. And then as the player expands, they get more choices. They can start to specialize with greater ease. Clever name already taken. Morning, Ross. Good morning, Clever name. It's wonderful to have you here on the stream with us. Today, we are talking about one of the most important, one of the most essential design-related faculties, the level progression system, which is the defining system for determining both the player's growth in your game experience as well as the escalation of difficulty such that at any point within the experience you are being matched an appropriate challenge for your current potential within the game. And this has been, as you know from our Discord conversations, one of the big topics. The biggest challenges we've had is trying to take a game like ours, which is naturally a closed loop chess game, and converting it into an experience that can be meaningfully played in an adventure. and how are we allowing the player to have this sense of adventure and progression using our very distinct and unique mechanics, which differ a lot from more traditional RPGs. And so we just sort of covered a high level of the design aspects of it, and now we are talking about the actual mechanisms through which we're implementing that process. So and the tool we specifically pulled out just now is the level progression spreadsheet. So this is really cool. We actually took yesterday, I created this spreadsheet to sort of map the high level definitions of what players can expect at various levels in terms of powers, in terms of challenge difficulty. Created this spreadsheet, and then rather than creating a whole new tool within the editor, the spreadsheet itself is the perfect tool through which to plot this. So instead, we created a way for our game to import the spreadsheet and then use this information directly to surface the player's choices, challenges, and so forth. And so that's what I was just demonstrating in here. Was this is the actual class that we have the player, we request the property for their level, and then get the data we need. And then this class converts the spreadsheet into a usable format. It gets the row for the level, and then it populates the different information we need. So we talked right now, our current use case was making it so the player gets a particular number of card choices based off of how powerful they are in level. They also have their shop choices. The number of cards in the shop is determined by player level. And so this is all gathered directly from the spreadsheet. Okay, and so how does this come out in terms of the actual gameplay? Let's go ahead and test this out now. So I mentioned here that we changed our choose a card. We have the option of putting a hard-coded value in here, and that's what we had done in our previous test. But now I want that number of card choice to be based on player level. So I'm accessing the player's level progression, number of card choices. So it's going to pick the appropriate number of card choices based on that spreadsheet mapping we have in here. All right. And to do some tests, we've got another rule that lets me hard code the player level so I can actually verify it's working. So let's go ahead and set the player level initially to 1 and save that. Okay, and now we're going to test this and start scenario. Ta-da! Okay, so we're going to incinerate this poor poison. And victory! Alright, so I've just leveled up, and I get to choose a card. Alright, and you see here I have 3 choices. I was level 1, and at level 1 I should have 3 card choices. So, alright, that's good. Now let's go ahead and test it again. I'll take this guy. This time what we're going to do is change our level. We'll make it level 20. Save that. Save this again. And let's test it again. So at level 20, down here, let's see, scroll down, I should have 4 card choices. Let's see, then we'll test again at level 36. Okay, so let's go ahead and see here. There we go, attack him. Ta-da! 4 card choices. That is awesome. So exciting. All right, and one more test. We'll put it at level 36 this time. And as we just saw on the spreadsheet, I would now be expecting to have 6 card choices. So let's try this again. And I can choose from 6 now. So obviously more choices. Again, this is not something you want to surface early level because you know the whole goal is that early on you're either picking from a limited draft or you're trying to understand what your choices even are. You don't want to be overwhelmed by choices. But more advanced players, as you get further in the game, this is great because now I have a familiarity with what I can do, and now I'm looking for cards that maybe complement my particular strategy. Like maybe I want to make the Suicide Squirrel deck, so I'll take the Detonate card this time. Wouldn't have had that choice if I only had 3 choices, but I got 6, so I got an easier chance of picking it. Okay, same thing with the shop test. So we've got a shop here, and likewise what I've done here is recoded the shop. So I want to get the appropriate number of cards for the level I'm at. So let's see here. I'm at level 22. And what should I expect to see at level 22 according to the spreadsheet here? Level 22. And I should see 24 card choices in the shop. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out. Okay, let's go talk to the shopkeeper. Yo, what's up? What do you got for sale? All right, so I've got oh, wait, do I have the right number of rules? Level 22. Oh, okay, maybe I have something. Maybe something's wrong here. I have 3, 20. That's 24. We have 36. Maybe I did this wrong. Oh, wait, I did this wrong. I'm sorry. What level are we again? Let's see. Set level 22. Okay, let's check this again. Oh, that was level 20. I was looking at number of cards. Sorry. Level 22, we should have 36 cards. Okay, and we did. We had 36 cards. Clever name, already taken. I like how she talks to the shopkeeper with her wand. Yes. Yeah. Hey, shopkeeper! Stab you in the face. So funny story about that. I realized that I had a bug with regards to interactions and character facing. It had to do when I was collecting gold. I noticed when I was interacting with treasure chests that the character was not turning to face. And in order to get that working, I had to instill some kind of cast animation. So what really should be happening is that I need to define a new animation that's appropriate for interaction. So this could be like putting her hand out to wave or doing something of that nature where she has yeah, not necessarily attacking him. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but it was necessary because otherwise the character wouldn't turn to face. Um, like she would just keep facing forward in that case. So slight bug there, but that's a simple replacement of that animation with an appropriate what's it called interact animation. Yeah, even just putting a hand forward. Yeah, something to show you that you're interacting with them. That totally makes sense, Leonard. Yes, indeed. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, this is a great example of how our progression system works. And what's great about this, being in a system as flexible as is Excel, is that with a tool like this, we can have very frank, open conversations within our Discord, and people can be like, you know what, level, I'm having a really hard time beating past level 13. Or, you know what, Ross, I'm sorry, but playing levels 1 through 5 is just so boring because it's just too easy, or whatever it is. And based on that feedback, I can go in here and be like, all right, you know what? Maybe it would help if you had more choices from the shop at whatever level. So let's just do a quick example of a test here. So before let's see, what we were at here. We were at level 22, okay, and we discovered we had 36 card choices at level 22, right? So let's find that again. Level. Clever Name says CSV is a very useful data format for this sort of thing. And why reinvent the wheel when you've already building so many systems? Exactly. That's why I was just like yesterday. I'm like, why do I want to build a whole new module for this one? This is like the perfect tool here. There's no way I could work faster than I'm working here with anything I would be building. I can't expect to make a better Excel than Google here. That's not my specialty. So I'll use Google's version or Microsoft. Either way, it doesn't matter which one. All right. So anyway, so we said level 22. That was the one we were testing, and we said we had 36 cards. Let's say for whatever reason I want to give players. All right, we'll give you more cards. We'll give you 48 cards at this level. And now I just go ahead and we're going to download it as a new CSV. Where's my no, Excel. We actually downloaded it as an Excel, even cooler. It can actually be in its native format because it has multiple sheets. And we're going to go ahead and replace this. Okay. And then I'm just going to go ahead and republish our definitions tool real quick, and then we'll test this again, and we should see that we now have 48 cards instead of 36. All right, publishing. Yeah. So I'm very excited about this because what's cool about the spreadsheet is that it's very easy to add all kinds of different attributes and elements to it. It also lets us very customize the progression curves. So one of the cool things we can do is you know, progression is not always about making the difficulty perfectly match your level. Sometimes you want to have little pits and valleys, right? Where you get an extreme challenge and then you've got a little bit of relaxed tension, right? If every battle is like a hardcore tension, then the game won't feel very relaxing to play. You'll get burned out because you'll be on edge the entire time, and that's exhausting. You want to give players a sense of both like these high peaks and then kind of little pits and valleys. And so one of the cool things with that is we can control that as well. We can simply say, let's give them a relaxed difficulty at whatever level so that their next encounter is a little bit of a breather after having faced this boss in the previous level, right? So you get these sort of, you can do these pits and valleys like a curve that is more naturally acclimated to a real human emotional experience, like a roller coaster. You don't want to have a roller coaster that just goes down forever. You would get your stomach would pit. You need to go up at some point, right? That's the idea in the game design as well. All right, so let's refire this up and validate that our test works. And all right, we're going to go to the maps shop test. All right, so we said that we basically changed it to have 48 cards. So now I'm expecting that the shopkeeper will have 48 cards. That will confirm our test is working. Okay. And hello, Mr. Shopkeeper. Like I'm stabbing in the back now to see your wares. And look at that. So got 36, 48 cards. So there we go. So that worked effectively. So that's what's awesome, is that now we have a way to like quantify the players, to measure players' power level and to map an appropriate challenge for that power level, an appropriate reward for that level, an appropriate resource for that level. And you can sort of think about how we can expand upon this. Of course, we can add things like what amount of gold should the player have access to at particular levels, so that the balance of the game feels like the kind of experience we want to have, and what kind of enemies, what kind of I mean, any number of things can be mapped to this. What types of abilities can start to surface, and so forth. So pretty cool. Yeah, incidentally, a little side fun thing about the shopkeeper. You know, I thought it'd be kind of fun. A lot of the old school games I was inspired by did some really innovative things where, you know, you could do things like, what happens if I burn the shopkeeper's house down? What's going to happen now? Oh no! The shopkeeper has been enraged and he's coming to get me. So now he's not selling goods anymore. He's out to get me. He's out for blood. He's like, ah! Burn my house down, will ya? Yeah, just sort of a fun little thing I threw in there. Just in case anybody wants to try attacking the shopkeeper. Don't burn his house down. Ah, nice. That's a clever name. Yes, indeed. There's a long-standing tradition of being able to piss off the shopkeeper. Yes, I just hands down want to have a way to do that. And then another cool thing, so we didn't actually, last stream we never finished the shops, but I have since gotten the shops done, which is pretty fun. I'll restart the scenario. So one of the cool things we can do with the shopkeeper now is, yeah, he's just a thing, but let's see. So we added the ability to customize the shop. So we can say, basically give him attributes and say, you know what, I want this shop to only sell dragon cards. And I can hit save. And now when I go back to the shop and restart it, he will have an inventory that's exclusively dragon cards. Now in this particular case, I did not have, we're supposed to get 36 cards, but there are only 4 valid dragon cards, so I got just all dragons, but you see dragons there. Okay, so I could expand that shop and maybe we could say, all right, I'll take dragon cards and I will take, Clever Name says, my favorite one is in Link's Awakening for Game Boy. If you steal from the shop, the shopkeeper kills you with magic and automatically renames your character's save file to Thief for the entire rest of the game. Yes, yes, the Thief. I know, it's so good. Oh, man. All right, so look, we can say we have a shop that has dragons and marauders now. And you can see how this will affect the inventory of the shop. Okay, let's go back to that. And what do you got now, shopkeeper? I'm expecting dragons and marauders. Hey, look at that! Dragons and marauder cards. Pretty sweet, huh? So this allows us to get really fun and customized. Maybe we want to have a shop that's dragons and weapons or whatever. And you get the idea of how customizable it can be. And then, of course, the other cool thing we got working was the you know, the landscape orientation works. You also saw how it appropriately chose the right layout of cards. It's showing the card prices, and the cost also works. So if I pay for this, he goes away. Oh, my gold, it's gone. And if I want to buy another one, oh, not enough gold. So we got that working from last week too. So yeah, pretty cool. Anyway, so that's the, oh, I forgot. He doesn't like you destroying any of his things. Sorry, shopkeeper. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. Undo. Relive my mistake. Okay. Yep. All right. So that's the progression system, and kind of how that's shaping out. So I'm really excited to share this. Like I said, this is one of the key elements of game design is being able to plot your gameplay experience long form like this, and you know, Yeah, I'm really excited to have shared this with you guys. Clever Name says the shopkeeper should just start summoning all the cards he has for sale if you attack him. See, there you go. The cards he has for sale becomes his deck. I could totally see that. Yeah. We've also talked about the idea that if you defeat him, you could have like a little stockpile where you could steal his inventory and things like that. Hey, there's the pancreas. LOL, nice. Hey, welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. The pancreas is Peter, and I was just showing off our Excel thing and how we've got that fully working now. I think I was talking to him yesterday about this, and yeah, so this entire spreadsheet that we were using as a hypothetical is now actually making the gameplay change its behavior. Peter says, "So fast!" Yeah, indeed, that's awesome. Yeah, he's really excited. We're both really excited about this because we've been just like racking our brains trying to figure out how to how to make these like very important essential additions to the gameplay single player. This is all it's gonna. This is basically the singular document that determines whether or not you're going to have a fun time in single player or a boring time in single player. So it's very important resource going forward because it's going to basically be our like map, the magical map for making sure the player's experience is appropriately tuned in terms of growth and challenge at any point in the game. So I'm very excited to see that working. So far what we got working is we just demonstrated that the number of card choices will read incorrectly and work, and we've also got the number of shop cards working. Those are the two sort of low-hanging fruits. What I have not yet done is the card tier distribution. So one thing I would expect to see is if I were a level 1 character and I had a choice of 3 cards, then according to my sheet here, I should only be seeing tier 1 cards. So I have not programmed that yet. So that's sort of my next list here. I've got a little, where's my to-do list? Okay, let's see. This is the cool thing about doing these things. Every week I always try to think, what am I going to do in the stream? And I don't necessarily like want to plan a specific custom agenda. I want to give you guys the raw look at what the work really looks like. So this is what a game designer or game programmer like me is actually doing. Like this is what I was working on yesterday, and I literally took and picked up from where I left off yesterday in terms of work, and I felt like, you know what, this is interesting stuff. Players and aspiring game developers and veterans alike would all find this interesting. At least I know I do. Um, so let's see. Here's my to-do list I had working on. I work in little notes like this. I'm kind of like a scrap paper planner. I do my little like micro raw sprint in a notepad like this because it's just easy to manage. Um, I'm trying to move to the habit of putting things in Google Docs because it tracks everything and it's nice and it date stamps and everything. But I find this little local tool is just so easy because of the way it organizes everything, like these little tabs. This is the basic Mac notebook tool, and it's awesome. It's great for like making little scrap notes. Anyway, so the progression algorithm. This is sort of the thing where my attempt to program it. Let's go through the list, and I'll talk about what I've done and what's left to do. So I said I needed to add support to store and track traits in the carryover via the addition of an underscore. This will be how we determine carryover so we can add new track properties going forward without code changes. Well, that's not exactly what I did. I actually thought that was sort of a short-sighted way of doing it. So what do I mean by this? In the single player, when you move from level to level, um, it's going to store data that will allow your progress to carry over to the next level. So the kinds of things that are stored right now, your life total, right? If you're at 17 health and I go to a new level, I should be at 17 health in the next level. Your mana, your cards. Obviously, you want to have your gold carryover. It would really stink to gain 100 gold and walk to the next level and you start at 0 again. So that's probably a good one to store. But then most recently, level. But previously, this was a problem because in my player carryover data, this is the class that controls what's carried over. One option I have is to carry over everything, and that was what I originally started doing. That's this guy, and I put this note here. This should only be used for capturing game state for debug purposes. Why is it the case? Well, there are potentially hundreds of attributes that need to be stored, and they're not relevant to actually carrying over or the player's progression. So why do I want to waste player data and also my own data transfer rates? I've talked before in the stream about how data is not a free resource. It actually costs a considerable amount to transact, to have data transactions. So you want to be smart about how you use that and only store what's necessary. So previously I had kind of hard coded it, right? I said, all right, I want to carry over life, I want to carry over mana, gold, oh, whether something's loyal or not, whether something's been summoned or not. These are all things that were necessary to determine how things would play out in subsequent levels. But you see the problem here, right? The problem is that Clever Name says data expands to fill the available storage space. Indeed, that's very true. So the problem here is that I was manually coding these, and that's a big problem because for a developer like me that wants to do everything via DLC ultimately and not have to worry about client updates, this is not good because any change I make here is a client change. So one of the things I recognized was I need to add player level. Like we want to be able to have that carry over so that you can continue growing in level. Well, I said enough is enough. I'm tired of storing it like this, and so what I did was I created something. I created a new hard-coded type called carryover traits. And what I basically did was I used my existing player rule system. So this is the definitions that define all the player game rules. So I talked before about how this one section here defines all of the basic rules of Summoner's Fate, and I can change the rules of Summoner's Fate at any given time. So, like, you have a maximum mana of 5. I could change it to 6. I could change it to 7. I could make it so you get more mana per turn. I could do anything I want to change the rules of the game here. But the other thing this thing serves as is a storage thing. So you can see here I've got all these different properties like mana, storage. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could just make a block that says, these rules define traits that are stored for carryover within the single player campaign. And then if the value of the trait is 2, use the base value instead. So here we go. I took that same list and I converted it into a dynamic definition. And now I can add and remove any trait I want at will without having to do a code change. It's awesome. So life is a 2 because I want base life to carry over. Life remaining carries over, mana carries, gold, and there's our level property. Oh, sorry, loyal. I can't see the rest of these. Let's move that over. Summoned. Oh, goodness me. I don't even have level on here yet. Let's make sure that's a problem. See, already we've made a mistake. Let's go ahead and correct that right now. We need to have level on here. There's level. I want level to carry over, so plus that one. There we go. Okay, so now level will also carry over. Let's save that. Can't believe I had missed that. So there we go. All right, now level carries over. And Clever Name says that's nice. That's nice. Yeah, that is nice. Okay, so that task is done. I added a new level trait. We created a property for shop items, which we just demonstrated. We talked about the player progression definition. So that basically that big structure I talked about over here that allows you to sort of make a query. Hey, level progression spreadsheet. I'm at level 5. How many cards can I pick in my choose a card prompt? Right. That's what this thing does. So that's done. Okay. Okay. All right. So where did I leave off here? This is what I have not done yet. When the choose card effect detects that the effect value is calculated by a property, example num card choices for level or shop items for level, it will use the progression definition to determine the cards that can be chosen for the level. Okay. So what this means here is that right now all I've done is map and made functional the number of card choices, but what I haven't done is created a map of the kinds of cards that can be appeared, right? So right now at level 1, I could get a choice of dragon or counterspell, and as we mentioned earlier in our discussion today, a counterspell is not a very useful card at level 1. It's an advanced card. It's only useful when you're fighting summoners who can cast spells. So if you're not fighting spellcasters, you probably don't want to pick a counterspell. So you shouldn't even have that choice because the game should be smart and know that. And so what we need to do next is to fix that. That's our next task. What else we got on here? Increment the player level when they complete a battle as an immediate execution trigger, right? I wrote this to do later that we can define the amount of desired gold within that thing. I'm just sort of, sometimes I throw ideas in weird places. It's not really a task. It's more like a, hey, I just thought of this. But yesterday I was talking with Peter about how this spreadsheet now opens the door to solving all kinds of other problems we have in our design, which is like, how much gold should they be getting? Well, we can determine that based on how powerful they are, and their power level is right here. We can map any gold value we want. So maybe at level 36, you're getting more card choices and more money to spend. or so forth. We can create little dry spells. Maybe at level 23, we want to make the game really hard for some reason. You get only 10 gold at level 23. I don't know, and so forth. Let's see. We want to change the choose card algorithm to listen for level up instead of the battle end, and then we can store the level of the player on the summoner. Oh yeah, I was thinking it might be good to actually show the player level somewhere. So maybe your summoner is what levels up, and it stores a little level on your summoner. All right. Anyway, so really this next part here is, and it's kind of funny because after all this work, at the end of the day, the singular task I was actually trying to get to was making it so that the choose a card algorithm was a bit smarter than it is now, right? And what do I mean by that? Let's go look at this again. All right, choose a card test. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to give this an example one more time. Let's set the player back. Let's make the player level 1. So I'm getting a choice of 3 cards. All right, so keep in mind now I'm level 1, all right? And this is effectively, as I said, we're trying to move away from handcrafted curation and allow our systems to act as a virtual dungeon master to assist us in the storytelling process of our adventures. And previously, Peter and I had to manually code all the card choices, and I don't want to have to do that because it's a lot of work, and the game should know what choices are appropriate, right? In D&D, the dungeon master doesn't have to tell you at level 1 you can pick, power word kill. That's not a choice. It would make sense at level 1, right? You get like, what's level 1 spells are in D&D, grasping, shocking grasp or something like that. Level 1 spells, right? You don't want to have to put the task of progression onto the dungeon master. Let the game engine handle that for you. So that's what we're doing with this. But you can see right now how this is a problem. So even though it's appropriately choosing 3 cards, actually these choices were not too bad. Those are all kind of good, not bad level 1 cards. But let's keep going and see what else I get. The issue is it's just totally random right now. It's literally picking out of every card. Okay, yeah. Frost Dragon at level 1. That's that's way overkill. Way overkill for our current situation. So that's an example of like a bad roll. And too random is not good. A little bit of random is good, but you don't want it to be all random. You want to have an appropriate card for a level 1. I guess technically I'd be level 2. I'd be level 2 now. Level 1 going to level 2. Like a level 2 character, do I need to be able to heal 15 life? I currently have 5 life. This spell costs 4 mana. That doesn't make sense to be seeing that card right now. And so that's what we're trying to fix next, is that. Hey, I have a special guest going to be appearing here. Let's come on in. Come on in. Everybody, this is Kelly. I'm trying to see if I can switch my mic here. I'm not sure how to do this. Let me see if I can figure out how to switch the mic to the other mic. I'm trying to think what I would do here. Soundflower. I wonder if I just unplug the speaker, if it would work. All right, we're gonna do a test here. You guys let me know if you can still hear me talking.
Yeah, that's starting to hurt my ear. Oh, God. All right, can you guys hear me? Is the new microphone working, or do we lose sound? Give us a sign. Hello. Yep, I can hear you. All right, good. The microphone's working. All right, so hello, everybody.
Hello.
This is Kelly, my wife, and she is also our. What's her title? Official title?
Community marketing manager.
Community marketing manager. So, yeah, she helps us with all the creatives. Why don't you just talk about what you do? Let you describe it.
Like Ross is saying, I help with all the creatives. We do a lot of brainstorming here at home over characters and cards and gameplay. That's kind of the back end of what I do. But also I help design a lot of the marketing pieces that go out. I'm off camera.
Oh, you're off camera. Sorry, I thought I was fixing it. Are we centered now? I can't tell. I'm going to look at my monitor here.
Well, I'm going to keep talking.
You go ahead. Keep talking. I'll fix the camera.
But essentially, I create a lot of the pieces that you see on Twitter or Facebook or on the forums. I do a lot of that. I try to chat with you guys as well. But I just love being involved with the community. I actually would like to get involved even more as well. Ross, what you doing on your phone there?
I'm trying to unlock it, and it just keeps going into an infinite loop of
Oh.
making me unlock it. That is
Technology.
what's happening here. My whole phone's just completely locked. I'm gonna have to restart it. So unfortunately, are we in camera now? Are we both in camera? I can't tell. I was trying to look at my phone to see, but I don't
Okay,
know.
are they seeing this screen?
You know what? Here, we're gonna do this.
Are they seeing this?
Yeah, they're
screen
seeing that
here?
too. Here's what we look like.
Ooh,
Oh yeah,
there we go.
you're slide in there. Let's go ahead and just. This is kind of awkward. We're showing you the. There we go. That's better. I'll sit close to you. All right, and there.
Hello.
That's better.
I also helped a little bit with some of the art design. For example, restoration. I actually helped create that card. So I did some of the art design as well. Thanks. Hi.
Oh, we got Kelly here. We're gonna have to show you some specific things. So obviously the my favorite creation of Kelly's are the where are they? There we go. These guys. So Kelly was responsible for all of the very fun. You want to tell the story about these rats and how they came to be?
Sure. They came to be, I believe it was a bike ride that we had, and we were talking about characters. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of you feel similarly, but there feels like there's a lot of the same on top of same on top of same characters out there. And there's sort of like these tropes about what characters can be. So one of the tropes I feel like is with rats. Well, it's not even really a trope. It's actually reality that rats are usually kind of dirty. Sewer rats, I suppose. And I really like turning things on their head and trying out different ways of looking at things. So we were kind of thinking about rats. I can't remember how we just fell onto rats. We were thinking about rats, and it was sort of like a discussion of, well, what if we took rats, but we made them, really proper? And then I started envisioning top hats, and then really the steampunk theme sort of came into my head when I was thinking about that, kind of proper, gentlemanly type rats.
So Clever Name says rats are super clever in real life. So
see,
I love this.
And they're actually very clean. There's a lot of, yes, they are. I remember maybe it was a mouse, but I just remember there was one in one of my science classes, and they had it in a little thing, and it just cleaned itself the whole time. And I thought I was like, wow, they're actually quite clean. Anyways, so we just went back and forth on this, and we came up with the idea of them being steampunk rats. I envisioned a little mustache. And then, we also had the Celestial class. So we wanted to add a race of Celestial class, so that's how they became Celestial, Steampunk. The Timekeeper, I'm kind of forgetting how we came about with the Timekeeper.
Oh, because we were trying to figure out where to move. So initially I was going to make the boring sewer rats, and Kelly she was managing the art concept at the time, and she goes, boring! Just like nonchalant, she just looks at me and goes, lame, boring. And it was so yeah, and that's where she came up with this idea, that challenging my sort of non-creative, only being able to see things from a traditional point of view. And so anyway, we were trying to figure out things to populate for the Celestial, which was all about Celestial is about order and creation, and time is one of the essential elements of order. And so,
we also wanted, I remember now a little bit, we wanted to have some spells that had a time element to them, where you could go back in time, or you could speed up time. And I think that's how we kind of came up with that. One of my favorite things that I kind of helped create was the little bomb that looks like it was, to come up with a steampunk bomb. I did a lot of steampunk research, and to come up with I wanted there it is. I wanted kind of an old-timey bomb that you would see like in a Looney Tunes cartoon. But I wanted to add a steampunk element and sort of add a time element. And I took just pieces of different things, put it on a picture, and sent it to our art studio. And they came back with this, and I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah. Smart time cards we have.
They are useful tools.
Turn back time.
Tropes are useful tools. And subverting them is also, I agree. There's a place for them, you're right, as a survival technique, but then there's also a place where people want to, I think creativity sometimes gets lost behind tropes, or sometimes it's creative to turn the trope on its head. And I think that's a place where the Steampunk Timekeeper Rats came out of just a place of wanting to be creative, take elements of things that were interesting to me, and just make it fun. But I like how they turned out. I mean, our art studio did an amazing job, and it's sort of like when you see these sort of different pieces you put on a piece of paper, and then they bring it back to you, and then it brings up new ideas of, ooh, now we can do this with that, or this with that, and so I think we're even still developing some of the powers and spells that they'll have. So yeah, I love that spell. The little.
I was like, you got the rat in it.
Yeah, I love how that turned out. Oh yeah, and the staff was really interesting too to come up with that. That was really cool because I wanted him to have a staff.
I guess some comments. Pancreas says it's part of the important mix of the familiar and new, safe and dangerous. And Clever Name says, haha, the hyperspace speed is totally Sonic shoes. Where is hyperspeed?
Let's see hyperspeed.
I'm going back to that one again. Sonic shoes. Indeed.
Awesome.
Somebody was joking earlier at one of the events. We were at the Stream LCC meetup, and they said the hyperspeed should be like a squirrel drinking coffee and like shaking.
That's how I am in the morning. When I have my coffee, you should. That's where we have a lot of our best conversations. I am a morning person. Ross is a night person. So somewhere in the middle of the day, we're okay. But anyways, in the morning, especially with my coffee, I'm like, what about this? And what about this? And how about this?
Indeed.
Hyperspeed.
Forget where the rats went. Put it back in the rats. Put it in the loop.
Yeah, I really like the Time Bomber. We haven't totally, as you can see, a lot of things we haven't totally, fleshed out their powers yet. And I really like the, what do we call her? The Timekeeper Warrior. She's a lot of fun.
We're still trying to figure out what his power is. I haven't determined what that's. Infinitely distilled, cold brewed, temporal coffee. Yes.
We should add that.
Yes.
Special power.
We're still trying to figure out what his summer power is because I really want to get him in the game. But
and ideally, and I'm not sure if they've been in the game yet, but they're actually going to be a little smaller than the rest of the characters, right? I mean, I still wanted to keep with the idea that they are.
Oh yeah.
They're bigger than normal rats, but they're still going to be smaller. So on the screen, they will be when you play them in the game. They'll be a little smaller than some of the other characters.
Go to grass level.
She's an airship, right? Exactly.
Yes, she needs an airship.
That actually would be pretty sweet.
That would be sweet. Yeah, vehicles expansion
coming. Maybe like a steampunk like air balloon. Take her away to the other side of the screen.
Here, I'll put them on the side.
Steampunk air pirate. There we go.
So like
she does kind of have a pirate aspect to her.
There's a Lich King.
I agree.
And where's another humanoid here? Let's get a. Here's a where's a dragon at? Let's see. Figure that out. There's a dragon's pretty big, and then
right.
By comparison, here are the sizes of the rats. Let's see, they're underneath the. It's hard to find a picture in the list. Have you seen them? Oh yeah, they're at the bottom. Okay, here you go. So here's how big the rat is compared to that. He's really small.
Yeah, so they're gonna be a bit smaller, small but tough.
This guy's he's a little more. We were trying to make him represent like he's a little plump because he's kind of like he's a fat.
I wanted a little plumper rat. Yeah.
But there's the rats. He's got his little hat. It's nice.
And the monocle.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, I just sort of barged in. What were you chatting about before I came in?
We were talking about the level progression system. Oh, here, let me just read this comment real quick. Pancreas says, I think it would be so fun to have a series of environments that are on airships and you could see the ground drifting by far below. Dreaming. Oh, absolutely.
That would be cool.
That would be awesome.
Just sort of fading by.
Oh, yeah.
Like they would be fighting on a ship.
I know a good transition to this. So one of the things, so we were talking earlier about progression.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Introduce knockback to introduce people to the ground.
Oh, yes. Use knockback to, yes. Thank you. That would be good.
Maybe we could add a little sound effect.
See how much more fun it is when Kelly comes on? I'm talking about like how excited I am about these boring spreadsheets. Here's what we're talking about. We're talking about this for 2 hours.
Yay, Excel!
Here's my Excel spreadsheet. All right, who wants to design games? All right, everybody, let's go ahead and open up Excel. Get your spreadsheet. Get your formulas, right? You know, like, yeah.
Yeah. No, airships.
Yeah.
And knock back to the ground.
Kelly comes on the street.
That's gotten my wheels turning here. I can actually really see that.
Yeah.
I also kind of see like dueling or like
fencing.
Fencing.
Yeah.
A little bit.
You had a fencer idea.
That's right. I did have a fencer idea.
That was one of your ideas.
I think it was going to design a female fencer. I never did flesh her out, but she was on the list.
Yeah.
After 200 characters, we still have so many more on the list.
So many more. Yeah, we had to stop.
At some point, we had to stop because I mean, it is so fun to come up with ideas for characters, come up with powers. And then be like, all right, now let's do the same one but different clothes, But then eventually we're like, wow, we have all these characters. We gotta do something with them. We gotta put them in a game. So we did have to stop at some point.
Yeah.
But that was a fun time. I think that was like 2016, 17. And a lot of you guys helped us a lot with that because I remember that's when we did a lot of posting on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere where we were in Instagram. Where we were asking for ideas. I was having y'all vote on characters, which came in such handy because, I couldn't always predict what the winner was going to be. I would think it would be this, and then people would all pick this, and we're like, okay, the people have spoken.
That's right. People have spoken. Yeah.
So that was a fun time. Yeah, I hope to get back to that soon. Once with some of the art and yeah.
Yep. But at the end of the day, we had to make
This
boring
morning we were
spreadsheets. The boring spreadsheets are necessary to get the game
This
to
morning
work.
we were talking about lizards.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what I was going to transition to. So we
Oh,
were.
really? Oh, look at that.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's where I was getting to. So I had this bucket here. I was trying to create like
They
a
can
list.
see this.
They can see everything
cool.
on the screen. Yeah, they can see everything. So, this is one of the buckets where I was trying to create like, all right, what are the starting enemy mobs look like? Because I was trying to kind of categorize how we could have different themed dungeons. Oh, Clever Name says, and you guys have a Discord filled with like hundreds of interesting unit ideas.
I know
as
we have
well.
the best Discord.
Oh yeah, it is. It's awesome. There's
so much creativity.
we
there.
have our next like 7 expansions like already figured out with all the ideas in there. All right, so like this was like a list I had made to sort of start grouping things. We have undead. Now you're gonna see the pattern here. We've got undead, void. We've got orcs and goblins, which could be free will or arguably could be chaos guys. Like maybe there's a group of animals. That kind of fits in. We've got the ironclads for celestial. We got elves for celestial. Insectoids for nature. We got bandits. We got marauders for chaos. And then we got what about the arcane though? I realized that there was no essential faction for the arcane. And so I was going through my list of things in our buckets, and one of the things we are super excited about are lizard guys, right? But there's a big problem with the lizard guys, and I'll explain.
Is it tropes?
Tropes, yeah, it's definitely a trope issue.
It's not a trope, but it's definitely
We're gonna go find some lizard guys.
There's a very typical type of lizard, fantasy style out there.
All right, let's see if I can find. Yeah, okay, so we had lizards that were basically what it came down to was we made lizards, but we made them too much like tribal looking, Aztec-y, jungle looking lizard people, which is sort of like and the problem with that is it's just too much like the trope. Just like if like the old Ross was going to make sewer rat mutants, which is just like everybody else has done. It's not very unique to Summoner's Fate.
Right.
Whereas steampunked celestial time traveling rats is interesting. Like I can sell that and be like, we've got hurling squirrels, we've got celestial steampunk time traveling rats, and we've got.
But it's not even just about sales. It is what it is, but it's also just fun. You know what I mean? Like you've got you got rats, and we're gonna play them like all the other rats, or you've got lizards that are going to be the jungle. It's always kind of the same thing, and so your mind always is sort of thinking this sort of two-dimensionally, right? But if you start thinking, well, what else can we do with them? What other worlds can we explore and expand on? And then it gets us, so then we get all excited. And then Ross had a really, really good idea this morning when we were having our coffee.
Yeah, so I said we had this gap of characters where I needed a faction, and there's nobody really filling the arcane faction. And our arcane spells are all about ancient technology, mystical abilities associated with like warping of physics, gravity, and also psychic energy. And wouldn't it be awesome in the same vein of taking sewer rats and making them prim proper time traveling rats, and taking the lizards, which are typically associated with like, the evil dungeon or evil jungle poisony tribal thing, and making the lizards, which, if you think about it, would be one of the most ancient races on the planet in terms of Earthspeak. If lizards had...
Lizards.
Yeah, anyway. So, here's the pitch. Cybernetic, technologically advanced, arcane wizard lizards.
Wizard lizards.
Oh, hey, Clever Name has it. He said that. I didn't see that comment. Clever Name says lizard wizards. Clearly. It even sounds funny.
Lizard wizards.
Lizard wizards. Yep, cyborg lizard wizards. That's the new pitch for that. So it's a celestial steampunk timekeeper rats and cyborg lizard wizards.
I like it.
So now I want to take the lizards back to the art shop, and they still the models look cool. I mean, you can see all the detail on the faces.
The lizards are cool, and so Ross can
get rid of these Aztec swords. Get rid of this armor.
Yeah, we can just take them
get
down
rid
to
of
their
this.
basic.
What the?
He looks like he's got the wizard body.
I guess he does. He's got some kind of clothing on.
Malevolent wizard, right? Or what?
I don't know. He's got like pink, purple skin.
Like a chest, human chest.
Anyway, yeah. So there you go. So now imagine him with like decked out with cyborg gear. And then like ancient cyborg tech, like the Guardians from Breath of the Wild. I haven't, not familiar with
played
that. But yes, that's the idea. Cyborg, maybe he's got the little boar guy going on and some like gadgets attached to him.
But I did have some questions about, and I'm curious what you guys think. I personally had some questions about adding, and I think it'd be great, but I'm just trying to picture it all. Adding cyborg or robotic type elements to lizards in a fantasy game. I mean, granted, we do have the Timekeeper Golem, who's like a robot.
Yeah.
And I guess if we sort of play on the fact that this is like ancient, it's really ancient technology, kind of like our interest in ancient aliens.
Yes.
Anywho, that's a whole other discussion. But, you know, it's ancient technology that's so ancient, it's sort of come back. You know, this whole idea of adding these cyborg elements, I'm still picturing it all and how it will all work in a fantasy type game.
Oh, yeah, I'm just trying to be funny here while you're talking. While Kelly's talking, I'm just sort of playing around. I'm trying to figure out
why does he have this human chest?
I don't know. But see, now does he look more technological now? See how that
he
even...
kind of looks like a man wearing a Halloween hat. But, yeah.
Well, he needs robotic parts on him.
It's odd. Well, maybe put the robot. Can you put the robot body on?
Yeah, let's put the robot body on.
See, he says it can totally work, I think. And that's how I feel. I'm like, it can totally work, I think. Yes.
What's the robot called again? He's
like the...
What's he called, though?
I know, I'm trying to remember.
I don't know what he's called either.
Something with... Isn't he...
Steam clock?
Steam clock... Steam...
No. I don't know what that robot's called. What's the robot called?
I thought it was Steam Clock.
I thought it was Steam Clock, too.
Master of Disguise. Reptis Warrior.
Reptis Warrior. Master of Disguise. What is that? I don't remember what it's called now. I'm trying to remember what that...
I thought it was Steam Clock.
Apparently that's not what the asset's called, because it would have showed up.
Well,
All right, we'll find it. We'll find it. All right, let's see.
Wait.
You see it?
Wait.
I'm going too fast.
Hold on, down. Go back to the D's. I think I saw it.
Dreadnought. No, not there.
No. Okay, never mind.
I'm looking for it.
It's actually just a guy. That's what I'm... Sorry. No. Dun, 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 dun.
It actually just the guy with the
Lizard
lizard
Man.
mask. Yeah, I'm trying to find the robot body so we can make him into a cyborg.
He looks like he's like, hey.
Marauder,
How's it
Medusa,
going?
Mountain Troll. I can't remember what that thing was called.
What it was? Sentinel.
Oh, Sentinels. Yeah, Sentinel sounds right.
Sentinels.
It had a different name beforehand. That's why we're not finding it, because it had some kind of a weird steampunk. Yeah, why didn't it appear there? It's not temple. Maybe it's at the bottom.
Oh wait, Timekeeper Golem.
That's what it was called. Timekeeper Golem. Thank you. There we go.
Whoa.
Now he's a cybernetic lizard. Cybernetic lizard.
He's shiny.
Well, it could, yeah, make him more like technological with like little lasers and like Borg probes on him. There you go. Now we're on to something.
All right, well, the general gist of what we were trying to accomplish. But yeah, I mean, I actually think we kind of pictured you, or at least I think you were mentioning kind of like having them wear sort of like ancient robes, but maybe they'd have like a cybernetic arm.
Yeah, Peter had some good concepts he was working on
Oh,
in
yeah?
the airplane. Yeah, I meant to tell you about that.
Like you said,
Yeah.
I think it would be kind of cool.
Cybernetic lizard wizard. There you go. There we go. Let's see how he looks on the actual thing. That is awesome. You need some awesome sound effects.
Lizard.
So he doesn't have his tail now. He needs to have this little tail at the back and it would actually look authentic.
Like a robot tail.
Yeah. Yep, there we go. Cybernetic wizards. That will be awesome. See, nobody's done that yet. Then we'll have another like weird thing we can pitch in our.
We like weird.
Yeah, we like weird. It's good. People then will start to then become. We'll have like it's moving toward our own, making the humor in the world our own. Like that's clearly from the Summer's Fate universe and not from D&D or Warhammer or anything else. Then that's important to us. Yes. Indeed. Pancreas says, so weird. Reminds me of a fantasy I had growing up that dinosaurs had all sorts of technology. Yes, indeed. I really want sound effects from that. I really like that, how that looks, actually. That actually looks decent with having him have just that body. We're just going to have him walk.
So there was an old Mac thing.
And so if you think about it, dinosaurs would have had, like, probably had been the most advanced things. They had...
Left in the rocket ships.
There you go.
Time traveling. It's funny that we're having this discussion because at work yesterday, one of my coworkers really likes aliens and another one really likes dinosaurs. And so I said, what if, in reality, aliens came and they dropped off the dinosaurs. A few of them died, left behind their bones, and then they took them away. I was combining the worlds. So it's just funny that this is sort of going back to that. Dinosaur makes their story species. So there you go. We could do eggs too because we certainly have the dragon eggs.
Oh,
so we could do like some sort of...
Absolutely. Something with eggs.
Well, it could be like...
I think their eggs should be like little cloning bats, so like a little tube, and the eggs are growing in there like in tubes.
Yes.
They have I want to get like special environments too, like kind of like how like this card has got these like very clearly defined like
is this the
circuit board looking?
Is the wife?
Oh, it's Outlander. Hello, Outlander.
Hello. You're coming into us creating cybernetic lizard wizards. Yes.
How did we get there? We started this conversation today talking about
Excel.
Excel. No, the game level progression. So level progression is basically the underlying systems that define how you as a player are going to grow in your faculties and ability to take on new and more escalating difficulty encounters so that at any given point in the game experience, you're appropriately matched to the right level of challenge.
Right, exactly, because I think we've all experienced games where you come in and you're just like, it's overwhelmingly hard and you feel like, wow, I'm terrible at this, and you leave. Or vice versa, you come into a game and it's so easy that you're like, okay. It's not very engaging. So finding that right mix of something being engaging at all your different levels, and Ross coming up with plans to be able to predict that, that's definitely that's a lot harder. To be fair, and I know we're mocking your Excel spreadsheets, but to be fair, that's a lot harder than coming up with fun things like cybernetic lizard wizards.
So we were joking. Earlier, I was talking about my spreadsheet, how exciting it is. You guys might see my spreadsheet. You're gonna see the difference of why Kelly's much more fun than I am. Here's what I was excited about. I talked about this for 2 hours today so far. This is a spreadsheet.
And to be fair, this is the strength of the game, right? I mean, the characters are fun. They're a lot of fun, but you got to have.
But what this spreadsheet does, so this is a spreadsheet, but it's a quintessential design tool that I just recently added the support for the game to import this, so I can modify the game on the fly in this Google spreadsheet. And you can kind of see here, what this does is it maps your progression from level 1 to level, we go to 56 here, and determines all kinds of things that will happen at any given level. So how much life your character has, how many card choices you're going to have, what kind of encounter difficulty you're going to have. And this all shapes your experience. And as we demonstrated earlier in the stream, we can now use this as a tool. So in our player feedback gathering process and discussions, players can say, it's way too hard when I get to level 12, or it's way too easy at level 3, or whatever. I can go in here, make a quick change, modify the experience, and instantly correct the game's difficulty so that the challenge feels more appropriate and more fun. You find that nice, perfectly tuned balance. So, yeah, I know, super exciting spell shows. And then Kelly came and we were talking about rats that can travel through time and cybernetic lizards. So Kelly's more fun. But spreadsheets, yeah!
Spreadsheets are fun. You had some nice colors on there. And it was organized very nice.
Yes. Nice. Anyway, but yeah, so that's what we're working on today. And then it's kind of cool because it ties in nicely. When we were going through our design process, we were just talking about how we had this list of enemies. And I was trying to sort of start to categorize enemies and types to create starting factions, like the type of things you're going to be fighting early on in the gameplay. And it's different because Summoner's Fate, you don't play, there is no hero that's the hero trope, right? You're not like the barbarians and wizards fighting skeletons and orcs. Like, that's one thing you can be, but you could also be the Lich King slaying ironclad celestial soldiers, or but typically bad guy tropes fighting other things. Oh, here Outlander says, okay, well, if we are going cybernetics, then I'm going to want cybernetic enhancement cards like Nano Eyes, able to pinpoint weaknesses, gives +1 damage, or cybernetic legs gives +1 speed.
Add nanobots to the game.
Yes, nanobots and all
The
kinds
wrong
of other,
trousers. Equip on an enemy unit, you control the wrong trousers.
the wrong trousers. Yes, there you go, exactly. Anyway, so when I was going through this list, that's where it was kind of funny because we came to this point where I realized I got a faction for every type of magic card except for the arcanes did not have a really good clear faction. So I'm like, what can fill that gap? What can fill that gap? And I'm thinking, oh my god, we have these lizards. And
Psychic squirrels. Oh wait.
you can kind of see. I should save this lizard too. Let's make him a copy. Let's make him a lizard warrior.
There,
3.
there you go.
And we'll hit copy. So make it, okay.
Yay.
So there you go. So this is what
He's in
he.
the game.
That's what he looked like before, and probably before he would have also been like
For some reason, he reminds me of a character
Jungle
from like
theme.
He-Man or She-Ra.
yeah. So you can see very very jungly theme, but now it's like that's the direction where
That's
you can see how it becomes you can again boar eyes and lasers and all that stuff. But now it fits another need in the game, which is we needed something for the arcane. Now we have a faction. Now we've got
Enforcing
something
pants on She-Ra. Put on these pants.
Outlander says, I just got the mental image of you holding down with the opponents and forcing
Put
pants.
on the pants.
Put on the pants. Put
Where?
on the pants.
Put 'em on. Oh.
Yes, indeed. So that's how we got to cyber. That's why I went from spreadsheets to cybernetic.
But the tricky thing, though, is
illusions.
I don't think it's easy to want to do, but I think we should not introduce guns. So I have a strong opinion on the fact that if we start introducing guns, which I think would be easy to do with a cybernetic character,
Oh, sure.
guns are going to overtake swords and squirrels.
They just need to be devices that are appropriate. Like they have, like
Right.
they harness energy blast, or they use like my original whole thing. You can see here in some of the
Which
artwork.
was tricky, by the way, when I
Let's
was
see.
designing the steampunk timekeeper rats, because a lot of steampunk weapons are guns, really cool looking guns, and it was hard to be like, no, I really want like a sword or a saber or a staff that's timekeeper. I'm sorry, a steampunk. That was actually hard to come up with that. I sort of had to design my own. Take this and this and this and this and make it this.
So here's an example.
Because I think guns would just kill the game. It would be hard.
Oh yeah.
Photonic condensation apparatus. Actually, a laser cannon.
Gunblade. There you go. All right. Well, here's some examples of it. So
We have a guitar blade.
we do. We have a guitar blade. So like in the arcane technology, you can kind of see in some of these cards where we shaped it. There's definitely like an energy, like a physics type energy that's being manipulated. But you can kind of see in the background here. There's also this little device. What's got on there? It's got little pink crystals. So we've got this idea in our game that there's these the crystals all tie into harnessing gravity. It's almost like the crystal represents a certain type of very unstable element, like a radioactive element. And then same thing in the gravity push. Sorry, not that one. Gravity trap. No, not that one. Gravity. This one. All right. So this guy's got like this gauntlet, which also has, as you can see here, little tiny crystals imbued into the gauntlet fingers. So this is another example of a technological device, but it's also very
Maybe we
fantasy.
should give those gauntlets to the lizard
Yes.
wizards. Give them those gauntlets that have gems or something.
Exactly.
I don't see guns here. More just need to make guns fit the art style. Fits well with one of the rats. Yeah, I mean, it could definitely fit the art style. I'm just nervous about guns are just so powerful, and I feel like you get on the board with a couple guns, you can just take everyone out. Whereas obviously with a sword or I don't know. I mean, I go back and forth on it a little bit.
Yeah, guns also just have a certain.
I go back and forth on it.
They have a. There's just
Like I can see a cannon, like Ross talks about, like a squirrel cannon.
Yeah. I want a squirrel.
I can see a cannon.
It just like it rips. just
True.
shoots. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a
musket style. That I could agree with.
Yeah.
I mean, where it's taking a while to load it up.
the flavor of guns too.
You're right. I mean, as long as it's not automatic or semi-automatic.
You just don't want to have that sense of the game's tone is much more geared at like a light-hearted fantasy,
True.
and the guns become much more of a. They skew more toward realism and violence, and that's just like it doesn't fit within the type of atmosphere we want to create. We want to have like serious things, we want to have scary things, but we don't want to have like hyper real violent things.
I mean, to be honest with you, some of our creepy,
No AK-47s, absolutely not.
No, never.
That will never be in the universe.
some of our creepy night terror creatures, which I'm not sure if we've even shown those yet. I mean, some of those are definitely creepier than a gun, I must say.
Oh, like
They get in your brain.
this thing. I love that. I think do I have the animation? I'm not sure. I don't hear the scream, but it's actually Kelly's screaming that does the banshee scream.
Yeah, I did that. It was like 2 in the morning. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And the kids were asleep upstairs. It was like 2 in the morning, and it's like that twilight hour where you're sort of like, and I don't remember why we were up. We were doing stuff, and I think it was, I don't know. Anywho, and Ross was like, okay, I need to scream, and I was like, well, the kids are asleep, but I have to make it sound blood curdling, and that's sort of what it came out. And then Ross did some enhancements of it.
Yeah.
But yes, that is my screaming. We'll probably one day replace it with something more professional, but that is my 2 in the morning, blood-curdling, yet quiet scream.
There's all kinds of freaky looking things in here.
Yeah, I really like his weapon a lot. That's fun. Because I can really take out a whole group of people.
RPG launcher.
Rodent-propelled
Grenade launcher. It's just a tube that a suicide grenade squirrel runs out of. Oh, dear.
I like rodent-propelled grenade launcher.
Oh, here's the skull. Oh, yeah. So here's like an arcane giant. So this is
Yeah.
kind of like another idea where it's
He's
like
really cool.
he's a construct. So he's like if you could picture like you see the crystals again, the theme of the crystals, the technological type elements, the the very focused crystal cyclops like eye. So this is another example of a technological
we could take
robotic
elements
type
of
thing.
this and add it to the wizards.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, that this was a constructed creature made out of this crystal / technology. Wow, that is excellent. The effects work so well for the screen. Ah, see, there you go. Yeah, so that's kind of where we think we could take the direction with those. Clever Name says, amongst my friends, we have the concept of an intercontinental ballistic vermin, which is actually just Pikachu and Smash Brothers.
It's awesome.
Stick to the rhyming wherever possible, whenever
I agree.
possible. Yes,
It's fun.
it is fun.
I don't care how old you are or how tough you are. Things that rhyme.
It's fun to say, and I
It's
mentioned
fun when things are fun to say.
it's the thing you want your friends to tell you. You need a good hook to tell your friends, like, oh, they've got cybernetic lizard wizards and steampunk time traveling rats. And
It's when we go to conventions.
Rodent
When we go to
guns.
conventions, the rest is we'll say things. We'll say things like, "Hey, would
Lizard
you like to
guns.
hurl a squirrel today?" And people inevitably always go, "Wait, what?"
What?
So I think when you have rhyming things,
My favorite response is, yes, I do.
yes,
Yes, I
this
do.
this was the day
Yes, I
in
do.
which hurling a squirrel was on my list of to do list.
Yes, exactly.
Lizard, wizard, blizzard. Ah,
Lizard, wizard, blizzard. That's right. Yeah, weird things like that.
see there, it just keeps going. It's funny how everything's rhymed with lizard. Lizard, blizzard,
Here's another monster that he kind of looks pretty freaky. That's pretty scary looking.
scissor. Not really.
Cockatrice. It's a cockatrice. Yeah, and you got these guys, which are kind of freaky looking. Let's say the goat.
Yeah, they were kind of one of our last things I remember that we designed
Yeah, they were.
before we're like this is fun, but
The withered butcher. Oh, these guys are pretty freaky too. The potato people. The potato sack people. Oh, goodness. Those guys are going to be fun. All right. So that's our stream for today. We've got just kind of, I'd like to do a nice recap toward the end of the different things that we talked about and covered in our stream and sort of where we're going with things. So earlier today, we talked about kind of the high-level vision of Summoner's Fate as a game that we want to instill a sense of adventure and progression within our existing awesome, fun chess, tactics, card-based game mechanics. So normally a game that is about outwitting your opponent in creative ways in a kind of a 1v1 sense and taking that experience and stretching it out over the course of an adventure. And I mentioned again that the key thing that we're doing to stand out in Summoner's Fate over the other games, in fact, this was a very important part. I'm going to pull this up because for those who missed it, I was really happy about the way I shared this earlier. Not this. Which one was it? This one. Okay. So we were talking about what defines player level and progression. And this is the kind of the summary of how I define what makes us different. So a traditional RPG, we said that one of the pillars we have for Summoner's Fate, we don't want players to have to grind.
Right.
And the reason I said this is that in the current market space as an indie developer, we are competing with literally thousands of other games coming out every single day. 5,000 plus games launched on Steam every single day. And any number of them have larger teams, far more resources, and far more combined years of experience. So there's no way I'm going to try and go up and make a competitor to Skyrim, right? Or a Diablo, or a game that's going to use these traditional RPG systems that they simply have more resources and are way better at doing it than I could ever do. And that's also just, it's a saturated market. Everybody's making games that are similar to others. Mm-hmm. And I also talked about how a lot of the mobile games are going in a different direction. They're so focused on the grind to get the reward that so much of the game has not even become the game anymore. It's more about how to get the reward. So they actually started making this new genre of games now. They're called idle RPGs. Where
what is that?
You don't actually play the game. You literally have the game sit there on a timer, and all your job is to come back like a Skinner box rodent, right? This is where Skinner was
not a steampunk rat, but a Skinner box rodent.
Yeah. So Kelly can tell you all about this. She was a psychology major, and they had Skinner would basically train rodents and dogs and different animals.
He's a behavioral psychologist, yeah.
To react to a stimuli of when they would get fed and ding the bell and they would start salivating and things like that. That's essentially what these game designers have done. They've taken games that, Clever Name says, a lot of games are basically work. They hook you so that you feel obligated to come back and click on the thing.
Well, and you know what's sad? Is that we've kind of accepted this. Like, oh, this is what games are now. We just, you go in every morning and you do your do. And we've kind of like bought into this. And then it's like, that's something Ross and I were realizing as we were talking. We're like, we don't have to buy into this. Games don't have to be like this. You can have cards and they can all be fun. You can have characters. And yes, some may be seen as, having a dragon is obviously going to overpower a bunny or a rat. But overall, they all have a purpose, and if you use them correctly and you partner them up, or you get spells on them, you can make all the characters feel awesome.
Yes, it's about
exactly.
Yeah, Clever Name says, I've got to get my loot box. Yeah,
and it's weird how we're like, oh, okay, this is how we play now, and it's like, wait a minute, it doesn't need to be like this. It can always feel awesome when you come into a game, and it can always feel like, all right, what am I going to do today? And how can I defeat this person using these really cool combination of cards that they were not expecting at all?
So I do a lot of these game dev talks for like the IGDA and stuff. And there's one in our YouTube channel, Game Dev Chats, you should check out, called The Crucial Threes of Building a Video Game Empire. And one of my favorite analogies in that presentation is about how I compare indie developers to the Rebel Alliance of Star Wars.
Nice.
And the AAA developers as being more like the Empire, in the sense that they have both far more resources, more powerful ships, but how do the indies strike back? You've got to have these little things that go outside the norm to, sort of break the mold. That's where indie developers succeed, not by trying to replicate or do better than the current tropes in the industry, but to completely go around them in a way that's unexpected and offers something new. And so I mentioned...
And sometimes that's hard, right?
Yes.
What is this game where characters are looking up at me? Do their neck hurt?
Yeah.
Is that weird? I mean, yeah, we get it. Like, it's weird, Like, we get it. But at the same time, it's a new way of looking at, literally, a new way of looking at something,
Yes.
Experiencing something. And yeah, we know it can be uncomfortable and almost like, I don't know how to define this at first. Exactly. Which is can be a struggle of us indie developers. But, I think when people open their hearts and mind to it, they're like, this is cool. I like that they're engaging with me. I like that I'm not just looking at the top of heads, but I get to actually have this character look at me going, yes, master.
That's right. and you think about, these games are inspired by the ones we used to play growing up that, they weren't about grind. What made
Right.
Dungeons & Dragons and Magic and stuff like those type of games fun was the fact that you weren't grinding to do things. You weren't repeating a task just to get something. You were doing it because the activity itself was genuinely fun. And it was fun because you got to unleash your creativity. You had to think and solve problems. And so that's why in our game, the key pillar for our progression is players will not grind to level up. There will be no grinding to speak of in this game. There will be no way to go back and farm gold or to farm battles or farm XP. That will be non-existent.
Or idly have someone farm it for you while you sit back.
Or even worse, to the point where it's exactly all I care. I didn't want to play your game. I just want to know what things I'm going to get. That would be a fail. So to kind of reiterate what I said earlier about our experience, our single player progression is designed to eliminate that entirely.
Yeah, the
That-
fear of missing out. Sorry. Keep
Yeah.
going.
Oh, yeah. That's
The FOMO. Yeah.
the FOMO. Exactly. Yes, that's exactly what it is. So Summoner's Fate single player is designed to, bring back the game to the gaming. The parts that's fun about it is the imagination, the creativity, and the problem solving.
And the weird.
Yeah, progression is a resource. So levels in our game, the ability to earn them, is actually something that will have to be very carefully and strategically planned. And I described it earlier as a puzzle of puzzles. So if you think about the sort of tactical battle as being like in itself a little micro puzzle that is fun on its own to play, the single player is a system that expands that to become a puzzle of puzzles. And it's like one giant crossword puzzle you're trying to solve is how do I ultimately defeat the super hard boss puzzle? Well, in order to do that, I've got to get these resources that are kind of scattered around the world, but I've got to make very clear choices about how I choose to get them, because if I don't go on the right path or the right order, I'm going to eventually consume all the resources and then the monsters will overwhelm me. So it's all about resource management, understanding that the resources are limited, carefully planning your approach to acquire them, and feeling masterful at the end because you had to think to solve the end puzzle. You didn't just have to repeat a task over and over. You had to actually I have to be creative. And then the ultimate level, as I said in our level progression here, we said there were 3 levels, 3 major buckets. Initial discovery, which is all about surviving the initial onslaught by discovering new cards and getting used to what's available. Then you are moving into the realm of specialization, starting to see patterns in the cards, and you're customizing your deck. So now it's like, oh wow, squirrels are really cool. If I combine squirrel grenade with squirrel makes squirrel grenades, I can outwit the super powerful ogres that are attacking me. And then the final tier is the exploitation. This is where players are now facing unfair hordes of monsters, and you have to be encouraged to think so far outside the box to the point that you're actually exploiting and breaking the game rules to win, and that those victories are then going to become the most meaningful and most satisfying. That's the end goal of what we are shooting to achieve with our single player. Yes.
Yay.
Yeah. So that's my soapbox. I'm gonna step down now. And as always, I thank everybody here for being on the stream with us, for participating in our discussion, for sharing your thoughts and ideas,
Making us laugh.
making us laugh with your very fun, witty comments. Yay, says Clever Name. Yeah, yes, we're so honored and so grateful to have such an amazing community of players and supporters here with us on our journey. And I look forward to continuing this. We'll be doing another episode of Develop with Ross next week, same time, 9:30 to 12 p.m. Mountain Time. I'm hoping to expand that. I keep saying that. I still got to just figure out when I can do another one of these things to keep our thing going. And as always, we're also available in our Discord. So just a quick shout out back to our homepage here, summonersfate.com. You can find our Discord here at the top. You can find our Twitch, our YouTube videos, Facebook, Twitter, all the typical things. And then I think I have it again at the bottom here somewhere. Join our community. Join us. It's an awesome group. We have really great discussions together. I'm directly involved in all of them. So, yeah, feel free to come join our community. If you're interested and don't have the game yet, we are available in pre-release. You can get that on our website, summonersfate.com. And I thank you all for being here. We'll see you again next week. That didn't do anything. It's not listening to my commands. End the stream. Okay, I'm going to have to just close down this way. How embarrassing. Are you sure you wish to do it? No. Stop streaming.